Greetings, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's episode number 52. Obviously, I'm speaking English again, so there's another one of those. This is going to be a special episode for a lot of reasons for me. Most obviously, because it's the last episode of the podcast, surprisingly enough. My life has taken like a very drastic turn lately. To my great surprise, I went through an event that was like very transformative, and I feel the urge to do other stuff now. I would like to take the moment to express my gratitude to all of you who have been following the podcast closely. I feel like particularly for the last few months, I've been getting so much heartwarming feedback, and I feel like it's really meant something to some people, and that's really nice to know as I'm now retiring it. I feel like even though there's been a lot of great info from all the guests over the episodes, I feel like a lot of people have really caught on to my intention, which is that even though the info is great, I feel like what I've been trying to give to the world is the mindset that is slowly divulged through the questions I ask. And I can tell from the feedback that that's like hit home with some people. And I greatly appreciate all of you who have been following the podcast. As we record this, I just put out the Elling interview, which was the Jubilee episode, number 50. And I was talking about how I was going to get quicker from 50 to 100 than I did from 0 to a 50. After that, in 2 days from now, I'm putting out episode number 51, which is a chess episode with Professor Atle Grønn. So that's going to be the most recent interview that's out when I'm putting out this one. And for that one, I felt like Atle Grønn was like a heavy hitter, and I had been using the free version of Zoom up until then, which required me to send people a new link every 40 minutes. I felt like he was like too important for me to do that. So I fleshed out 150 euros to upgrade my Zoom for the podcast, not knowing that I was only going to do one episode after that. I'm not going to talk about this publicly a lot. At least that's how I feel now. But since I appreciate the core listeners so much, I will not sort of take off without giving a proper explanation as to what happened. But I'll be doing that at the end of this episode. First, I will conduct my last interview, and it is going to be a glorious one. I could not possibly have a better guest for this episode, not only because I feel like his work intersects a little bit with my experience, but also because he's just someone whose work I've been following closely for the last couple of years. It has meant much to me. I feel like he's, to the extent that I have them, he's probably one of my greatest heroes. So it's a great blessing for me to have him on today. His name is Mario Garza. He runs a YouTube channel called Symbolic Studies, or he also it's like a full-on website. You can go to symbolicstudies.com. But if you follow the YouTube, you're gonna catch pretty much most of the essential stuff. I can only urge you to binge all of his material, starting at the bottom. I can not possibly recommend it highly enough. Mario's work is it's about understanding the cosmology of the world and the human journey through a lens of symbolism. And it's really a grand endeavor that he's on, and it's a glorious sight to just watch him go. And if you follow his work from the beginning, you will see that it started out being centered around symbolism related to the zodiacal signs. So he used to put out videos about the sign that we were in at the current time, according to tropical astrology. And I think he made it like a few rounds around the zodiac before his work kind of shifted focus, and he started focusing more about the non-zodiacal stars, like the other constellations and stars, and primarily Polaris, the immovable mover at the top. And it's just been a really fascinating journey to follow. One of the little realizations I've had along my own path is that I think if you can share knowledge and really make it hit home in someone else who's like ready to receive it, then you get to sort of pass the torch. Your hands are free and you're ready to receive more. And I think that's why Mario is like coming up with new stuff all the time, because he's like so graciously sharing. So he's like continuously placing himself in the flow of Sophia. Like it is a beautiful sight. Yeah. With all of this being said, thank you so much for being here, Mario.
You got it. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that warm introduction. I really appreciate it.
My followers know, but if English people or English speaking people are tuning in for Mario's name, they won't know, but my style is a little unorthodox in the sense that I don't do like research and then I ask the person I'm interviewing to tell my listeners the stuff that I already know, because I don't do like the show and tell stuff. I ask the questions that I'm like genuinely curious about. So if you're looking for like a fair presentation of Mario's work or worldview, you've come to the wrong place. I'm very familiar with Mario's work, and I'm not going to spend my precious couple of hours with him having him rehash stuff that I already know. So if you want to know how he arrived at his conclusions, you're going to have to go to his work. And it's a lot of it. There's not really a one short video that I can recommend that sort of encompasses all of it. But it's definitely worth the effort if you will do it. But for now, for the sake of this conversation, I'm not, and I'm sure Mario's not, asking anyone to accept anything, but for the sake of, like, if you want to understand the conversation and for the sake of the philosophical experiment, you should try to envision a cosmology where we are in an enclosed system, which is probably shaped kind of like an egg or an oval. And at the widest part of the width, like the horizontally the widest part, there is a flat and stationary plane on which we exist. The center of this plane is the North Pole, and at the North Pole is the Axis Mundi. The Axis Mundi is it's unknown to us specifically what it looks like physically, but it's like an elevator function that can take you up and down between the realms, and our realm is assumed to be the middle realm. And in this worldview, Polaris, or at least something very close to Polaris, is the top of this Axis Mundi. I haven't heard Mario talk too much about what's underneath, so I'm not gonna put any words in his mouth as far as to what is at the bottom of the Axis Mundi. but at least now you get like the most important. If I said anything that's wrong, Mario's gonna correct me in a second, but I think that like covers the basics. And also for anyone who's like scientifically minded, if you want to support this worldview based on experiments and stuff, there are better places to go than Mario's channel. Mario's channel is gonna substantiate his view through symbology, which is also a great source of information, but not as widely accepted. So, okay, so with all of this being said, my first question for you, Mario, and I'm going to phrase this in the past tense just for it to not sound like a bad omen, because the question involves death, and I don't want to sound like I'm speaking anything into existence. But obviously, we know you did not die last week, so I figured if I phrase it like that. Okay, so if you had died last week, and I'm under the impression, at least based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead and stuff, that when you die, the first challenge is kind of to understand that you're dead. But let's say that you died last week and you immediately understood that you were dead. Would your initial instinct be, all right, let's head the north and find out what's going on?
Excellent question. That's really interesting. I've thought about this, and I'm kind of the opinion, I wonder if it's something that you are consciously trying to do once you pass and transition to go to the north, or if it's kind of a natural sort of process that some people might understand intuitively. And so I think, though, what I've heard about the process of dying and death and that whole entire transition is that a lot of people think that you want to learn as much as you can about it in your waking life, and consciously. It's almost like muscle memory. So then the more you know about it consciously, the more perhaps you've worked with certain ascension texts that talk about some of this stuff, that then when you do transition and then you do die, there's fewer kind of questions about what should be done, what's really going on, versus, say, if you've never even thought about it, if you've never considered the possibility that there is an afterlife, then you're just going to be really, really confused, right, about potentially what's going on. And so I would say that I feel as though that I've done enough sort of work with this that I would be curious if I could will myself to go to the north. But I can't really say it's such a great trip, that final trip, that is death, that I can't really say obviously what I am or am not gonna do. But that does seem like a good bet. That seems like something that I would probably try and attempt. The big question to me too that a lot of people ask is like, should you or should you not go to the light? So there's different opinions about all of this, right? About going to the light, you're kind of reincarnating here. I've heard some people say that when you go to the light, you're actually, once you hit that light, you're actually just rebirthed here. So it's almost like you're a child being born here, sort of thing. So that's something that I've kind of questioned too, whether or not it makes sense to go to the light or what have you. So I
I've
guess,
questioned that
it's
myself,
still
but I think if you try
right.
to, I would like to find the origin of the don't go to the light idea.
Mm,
Because I remember the first time I heard about it, I think was like 2015, 16. It was a guy who was on the higher side chats,
hmm
talking about he had an experience, and when he didn't go to the light, eventually it was like taken off to the side. There was like a demon who explained stuff to him.
mm,
And it was very intriguing. I stopped following the higher side chat not too long after that, but I saw that guy was back on like last year or something. So I tuned in for that episode because I wanted to like follow this thread of not following the light. I have to say, the second time I heard him, I thought it was kind of underwhelming and
Mm,
unimpressive, and it was felt more like random thought experiments.
I see.
So I wonder if if this idea was it around before that, or was it seeded with that interview?
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, there's always that possibility for sure. But just to be really direct with your question, this is, as you kind of alluded to in the introduction, which I think it's really cool that you were following me when I was more so focused on astrology. And you could see I kind of dip back into it. And I've struggled with it, to be honest. I was just telling my girlfriend about this last night. But you've seen me do astrological stuff, and then you have seen me transition towards northern symbolism, the northern sky, stuff like that. And so, all of this is to say that I'm still like a perpetual student with all of this. And so that's one of the reasons why I named it Symbolic Studies, is because I always want to continue learning. And I think you put it really well too, because I'm putting stuff out there. I'm also learning a lot just from the comments, people sending me links, books, stuff like that. And so I guess when it comes to just answering your question, I'm still somewhat undetermined about how, I'm going to approach things when I do transition. But I have such a reverence for the Northern symbolism right now that I'll just tell you that it's completely integrated itself into like my daily sort of spiritual practice. Acknowledging the North, acknowledging my true North, the sacred center, and other things, and some of just like my daily routine. I try and acknowledge it, kind of accordingly. So it is part of just who I am and where I'm at right now. I have more of an earth-based sort of northern cosmology. And so I've really ditched a lot of my heliocentric way of thinking. And so we'll see what happens over the next several years or several decades with all of this stuff, if I have kind of like a really clear sort of trajectory with what I plan on doing upon death and all of that. But I think that's a very intriguing question for sure. So thank you for asking it.
If I had to force you to make a guess, do you think if you had died a week ago that you would A, like meet a psychopomp that would take you to the north or take you to wherever you're supposed to go? Or B,
Mm-hmm.
you would have to make your way there?
Right, right. Another great question. I would think that perhaps you might have to make your way there, and that perhaps this psychopomp energy is just part of who we are. I always talk about Mercury being a psychopomp, and it's really kind of a classic thing to say that men are from Mars, women are from Venus. But actually, the more research I do, the more exploration I do with these topics, I think it actually might be appropriate to say that men are from Mercury, women are from Venus, that the true consort or the true partner of Venus might actually be Mercury. And when you look at the glyph for Venus and then you look at the glyph for Mercury, it's just a difference of horns. So all you have to do is get the Venus glyph, add horns up top, and then you have the glyph for Mercury. And then literally horns, horns are very phallic. There's a sexual connotation with horns being horn. The goat and the ram are they have high sort of libidos and stuff. And so I think that potentially it could be a reference to us, and kind of our inner understanding of kind of us being our own good shepherds, kind of us being able to lead our own way. I tend to internalize a lot of things when it comes to mythology and just the different deities that are out there and all of that. So even when I see like a horror movie and there's a monster and it's completely, horrific, to me, I look at that monster and I'm like, that's an act of me. This is part of my subconscious, of my shadow. So all of the gods, demons are within us, sort of thing. So I think that we do have kind of like an inner mercurial sort of essence. And I think that Mercury, I think that we are maybe perhaps more of a mercurial species than not, actually. And I think that Mercury kind of unlocks a lot of about who we are as people, about our place here, about the things we're capable of doing. To be mercurial is to kind of be shapeshifty, and you can be this way one day, this way the next day. And that's kind of just how life is. I am both. I'm a boyfriend, I'm a son, I'm a friend, I'm a teacher to some people, I'm a renter to my landlord. You have these different roles, you have these different masks and stuff like that. There is a core essence to who you are. But just by the nature of this reality, we tend to wear a lot of hats. So sometimes you have to be really serious, sometimes you can be silly and let your hair down, all this kind of stuff. And so I think there's a time and place for all of this. And I think there's something to be said about discernment, about knowing when to be serious and knowing when to take it easy or lighthearted and all of that. And so I think Mercury is a really good metaphor for a lot of different things. But I think that its psychopomp nature might actually be speaking to an aspect of us, of kind of knowing the way internally. And if you just listen to yourself, I think you get a lot of answers that you don't necessarily need to read in books. A lot of people that I know that are very grounded, very balanced, have really good head on their shoulders. They kind of developed a lot of this stuff intuitively. They didn't necessarily have to go to a class or, do whatever. I think if you're just kind of paying attention, if you're listening to the natural world and listening to self, I think you can get a lot of divine answers that way. So I think perhaps that psychopomp sort of energy, I think maybe we might just have that kind of innately. It might be kind of a latent thing that comes online whenever it's necessary.
Where do you stand right now on the follow the light thing?
I would say probably right now, I probably would not go towards the light. Uh, it seems too convenient to me, and I feel as though um, the light, especially in today's world, love and light, the new age movement, how they kind of speak about the light and everything else. I think that there's something to be said about the light, having a dualistic sort of nature to it as well. So the light can blind, as an example. The sun can burn, it can scorch the earth, it can create a desert wasteland. And so to me, I think there's a lot of people in today's world where they are blinded and distracted by the light. It just makes me wonder if that's kind of a similar metaphor with this light after death, that if there's actually a distraction, and I have friends that have basically, they're convinced that you actually want to go towards the darkness and that you want to go towards the chaos, and that this is more primordial, but it's more honest, and it's where everything else came from. It's from where the light originated and everything else. So I would say if I transitioned tonight or tomorrow, I probably would avoid the light just intuitively. But that's just based off of kind of what I've heard and the various discussions that I've had over the last couple of years.
If you had died and you had successfully willed yourself to the north, what would you expect to find?
Well, I think it depends on how you maybe look at the whole entire process of death, because, everything is step by step. It seems like the older I get, the more of an appreciation I have for gradual steps in life. So if you're trying to accomplish a goal, you're not going to accomplish it overnight, especially if it's a hefty goal, right? And so you're going to have to chip away at that goal. So if your plan is to lose a lot of weight, you're not going to lose 20, 30 pounds overnight. It's going to take time, and it might take months, it might take years, depending on what your goal is with everything. So in my presentation I did, right, it's called Seven Gates to the Great Beyond. And so there's this idea that there's seven sort of main transitional points between this domain and what I just referred to as the great beyond. And so if you've already gone through all those steps and you're on the other side, my guess would be, as just being humans here and living in like physical 3D reality, if you want to call it that, um, it may be something to the effect of like, we may not even be able to accurately describe what it's like to be on the other side, because you're dealing with a more spiritual sort of quantum realm, right? There may not be such a thing as time, you literally could be part of the etheric sort of nature of everything, where being having just one perspective and kind of having this physical body living in this domain, it comes with a lot of limitations. There's lots of restrictions here in a lot of ways. It depends on your perspective, but this is a thing that people have said for a very, very long time, that the human body, I'm not even so much like this, but people have compared the human body to kind of like a prison like sort of sentence. A lot of like the Gnostics kind of believe this or whatever. And there's something to be said about this place here kind of being a descended sort of realm. I think that does make sense in a lot of ways. So when you transition to the other side, though everything is flipped on its head, basically. And so I think that more than likely, my guess is when people are here, we have a yearning or a longing to be spiritually connected, and we look up to the stars, and we dream about what it would be like to maybe be connected with everything. Perhaps some people have that kind of aspiration or whatever. So I think that when we're here in these physical bodies, I think in a way we're kind of envious of what's happening on the other side. And then I think conversely, if you're on the other side, you might be envious of what's actually happening here. You might long for, just wanting to, I don't know, just literally have a nice day with your lover and go out and have a picnic, or go out to the river, or go out to the beach, or do whatever simple pleasures, pleasures of the flesh sort of stuff. And so I think that what's going on is that what's happening on the other side is so drastically, radically different from what we probably understand here, that as humans, we may not even be able to like literally fathom or articulate what it would be like to be over there, just because our experience is so different. So I think when you're on the other side, you're basically in the spirit realm. And so you're more so in the symbolic realm, the dream realm. It's the realm of narrative. It's the realm of ether, basically. And so it's really hard to say, what you could expect once you go there. I would just imagine that it's probably pretty mind blowing. It's probably just drastically different from what our experience is here. So that's just my understanding. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated with all this stuff, because you don't really know, you won't really know until you actually go through this transition or whatever. So there's still like lots and lots of mysteries about, what your experience is actually going to be like when you cross over. Although there are people who have published books and they have stories about what they experienced and all that kind of stuff. And I have some of those books, but when it comes down to it, I can't concretely say I know, what's going to happen or what that's going to look like. You may not even have vision, you know what I mean? It's just, it could be literally just the realm of like feeling and intuition and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So my next question is going to be about symbolism.
Sure.
I'm going to do a little sort of preface to lay the foundation of the question. If you somehow disagree with the premise, then you'll just explain why.
Yeah, no worries.
So it appears that symbols are the language of the unconscious, right? It's I think it penetrates the limit both ways, but it definitely penetrates the limit like from downwards and up, sort of from the subconscious and into the conscious. It's how the subconscious speaks to us, and people disagree on how subjective the symbols are. Like obviously, if me and Mario both look at an apple, it might mean something to him and something different to me. But still, there appears to be, I would say, a certain level of objectiveness. Almost like you can compare it to how people use memes. Like you can use a crying Jordan in different situations, and it might mean slightly different things based on the connotation, but people still get it, and it means like more or less the same. Like there's a core there. Like there's a lot of situations where the crying Jordan is not going to apply, right? And in the same way, like it appears to be somewhat universal, at least according to some sources, like say Carl Jung, that like when people dream of like a sun, for instance, that it means more or less the same thing across cultures. Or you dream about losing your teeth, maybe you got financial issues. It's like no one taught you at any point that, you know, if you got financial worries when you become an adult, you might want to have a dream about losing your teeth. But it still appears to happen like at more than a random rate, sort of. So this would imply that there's like a bank of symbols that's collective that we all have access to. So that's like the premise of the question. We now assume this bank exists, and my question is, do you think we can consciously insert symbols into that bank? It's like from my personal practice, symbols have been kind of important, and I've been coming up with my own symbols and doing little rituals and stuff. And I wonder if, you know, could they show up in, say, in your dream, and you would know what it meant now?
Interesting. Yeah. I would say yeah, that just based on, how I tend to look at things, I think that is possible. But as you're kind of talking about all this stuff, what I'm reminded of personally, and I have been thinking about this more and more lately. But just, I was speaking about the spirit realm earlier. So just to kind of say that when I think you're looking at the night sky, I think you're looking at something that's closer to the spirit realm than a physical reality, which is why we've been taught in school, or at least I was, that you can actually hop into a rocket or some sort of ship and then go there and land, on these planets and bring home rocks and stuff like that. I think what has been done is that they have tried to materialize the spirit realm, basically. And so I think related to that is that we might be dealing with literally the realm of spirit above our heads, and then the terrestrial realm is the realm of matter, where the elements come and can play and mix and create new things and whatever. But I think that the spiritual realm, which is to say also the realm of ideas, the realm of thoughts, the realm of symbols, the narrative realm, the artistic realm, that existed, in my opinion, before the realm of matter, before the realm of physicality. And so when I see physical objects here, right here, I have a pen in my hand, right? The idea of a pen existed before the physical pen existed. And it's the same thing with everything here. So literally, that is why I think we have actual objects and why everything has meaning, because the meaning preceded the actual object itself. Most materialist people, they think it's the exact opposite. They think that we have things and then the human mind has tried to put meaning on everything, and that's just what we do because we're trying to find some sort of pattern, or we're trying to create some sort of holistic understanding of reality or something. And I actually think that the meaning preceded it. I think meaning came first. I think purpose came first. I was just talking to someone last night about this, about the fact that I don't know if you have to go look for your purpose. I think that maybe your purpose came first, which is why you're even here. So it's not this thing that you have to go on some scavenger hunt for, and so basically, I think that the realm of ideas and the realm of symbolism, it's so important because it really creates the fabric of our reality, So that is to say that I think that there have probably been, I feel like there's multiple examples of exactly what you said, of kind of inserting a symbol, into reality, and then it kind of taking on a life of its own. And then suddenly you have people with tattoos of the symbol, and it's on, posters, or people are, it's all over the place, just like these memes, because that's partly what we're doing here, is that we are here not only to interact with like physical reality for various reasons or whatever, but we're also here to play with symbolism, and we're here to play with narrative, and we're here to kind of interface with that reality and our, psychology and our subconscious and everything else. So we are doers here, but we're also thinkers, and that also carries over to the realm of symbolism. So yeah, I think what you're saying can definitely be, can be done.
I completely agree with most of what you said. Believing in the realm of ideas is basically, from Plato.
Mhm.
Uh, Personally, I was thinking about it this winter. Like, I, you know, I obviously don't know the future. This may be only uh, wishful thinking. Uh, but I have a house that I would like to be the next house that I live in.
Mm.
And this one specific house, it's for now like well above my pay grade, but I know the inside of this house very well. And there's a nice fireplace there.
Mm.
And so uh, this winter, when I've been sitting in front of my fireplace, I feel like I've been like uh, consciously grateful for the fireplace that I have, but also intentionally connecting to my next fireplace through this one, sort of mediated by the idea of the fireplace that they have in common, that they both come from.
Exactly. Exactly. I do that kind of stuff all the time. And it just reminds me when you're talking about symbolism, I've come across this idea that I feel like I'm still chewing on and unpacking, but it's this idea that there's a universal aspect to these symbols. So I think probably the best example would be with your mother. That your mother, she is Virgo. She is the maiden. She is the queen of heaven. She is Isis. She is all of these things, in my opinion. And so also that translates over, and there's a correspondence with all women being this archetypal sort of figure, this goddess that has had, thousands of names and has been expressed in countless ways, throughout history. And so there is the cosmic woman, the cosmic goddess, the queen of heaven, but she also has a terrestrial counterpart, and every woman is that terrestrial counterpart. So there is an idea, because you brought up the fireplace, there's like a world fire sort of concept. There's an idea that I have a candle burning right here. How different is this from, candles that burnt, thousands of years ago? Is there a cosmic fire, basically, that all of the other flames kind of came from? So it's this kind of idea that there is a sacred center to this cosmos, and that everything was expressed from it, from the center of this cosmic egg, or from the center of this cosmic torus field. You energy, and literally everything descended or came from that. So everything literally is patterned off of that. And so I tend to see these types of things now. Another great example, because I live in the forest, all of these trees, around me. And so I see all these trees, lots of pine trees, and I can't not think of the world tree. I'm like, these are all world trees. So it doesn't make sense to make a distinction between, I mean, obviously, I'm well aware that this tree versus that tree, they're separate, right? And they have a separate reality and a separate perspective and everything. But in another way, symbolically, they're all patterned, I think, off of the world tree. They all have a similar sort of structure and everything else.
For the
And so,
listeners who are unfamiliar, to Mario, the trunk of the world tree is the axis mundi. So you
that's right.
know when you're listening.
Yes, exactly. And so the axis mundi, or the world axis. And so so when I see that out in nature, when I just look at any tree, I tend to think about, the original or the origin. And there's lots of different concepts like this, the world mountain, the world serpent, and so basically, to your point, that when you're interfacing with any of these things, I think with your perspective, you could interface with all of those things that are part of that lineage, I guess. So yes, so kind of being at home with your fireplace, you can imagine it being, the fireplace at the, where you want to live at, that you're trying to manifest or what have you. And so, because really symbolically they're all completely connected and related to each other, so we have a cat right? And so I think it's funny that the Egyptians worshipped cats and all this stuff. And so it's just funny when I see my cat and then I see one of these Egyptian cats in a statue or something. I'm like, how different is my cat from this cat, from these cats back then? I'm like, it's virtually, symbolically at least, it's kind of like the same thing pretty much. And so I keep on using the word quantum, and so I feel like there's like a quantum sort of correspondence with all of this stuff. That the idea you have of father, whoever your father was, there's a relationship with that and the all father, or the cosmic father, if you will. And so I see that relationship in a lot of things these days.
I was told once that people start throwing around the word quantum, I should
Mhm.
consider it a red flag for new age bullshit, but I'll make an exception for you.
It's funny. I feel the same way, or I felt the same way, but I just realized that it's a like I when I say quantum, I kind of mean, to be honest, I think a lot of quantum symbolism is spiritual symbolism, basically, and that they're trying to put a sciencey spin on things. And so I feel like it's kind of a word that I'll use sometimes just to convey the interrelatedness of everything, the interconnectedness of everything, right? Quantum entanglement. But yeah,
uh,
I hear you loud and clear.
for my next question is something I've been wondering about when I've been listening to some of your presentations. You sometimes mention that predating the zodiacal astrology that is solar based, it
Mm,
was something you could call a polar astrology.
mm.
I think I've heard you say several times that there was a different astrology, probably based around the pole, but I never heard you like source it or
Mm.
I never understood like where you got the knowledge from. Can I just ask you to expand on that?
Yeah, sure. So it's actually really interesting. The first time I ever heard this be referenced was through Michael Tessarian. And I don't know if he followed up with this research, but I remember him talking about a system that predates modern astrology and that it's a seven stationed system. And he alluded to it in this one program. And in my mind, I was already thinking about Ursa Major and the seven stars of Ursa Major being a circumpolar constellation that revolves closely around, the pole star and has a really strong relationship with the pole star. And then it wasn't until, a bit of time after that did I start reading material about it and start kind of understanding that this is what he was talking about. And so there's a few books that I have. Actually, of all places, one of the books that really turned me around on this was it's called The Gates of the Necronomicon by Simon. And he gets into the idea that
Ah,
H.P. Lovecraft, yeah, that H.P. Lovecraft created a new pantheon of deities. And whether he was consciously trying to do that or not, but people after the fact started using his deities and created correspondences with Sumerian gods and Egyptian gods and things like that. And people found out that his pantheon was so sound that you could actually use it for magical workings. You can use it to do all sorts of different things. And so, post Lovecraft, post Crowley, that was a big thing that people were integrating Lovecraft into black magical practices, and they were kind of fusing that with chaos magic, and they were also fusing that with Crowleyan kind of magic as well. And so Gates of the Necronomicon goes into this idea that the preeminent gateway of the ancients was at the north, and that they were really concerned with the rotation of Ursa Major around the pole star, and that basically what the book says is that there are opportune times to use this gateway based on the position of Ursa Major. And Ursa Major is the Great Bear, right? And so in this book, it says that when the Great Bear hangs by the tail is when you actually want to access this northern gateway, which is the stair to heaven, which is the bridge or the pathway that the psychopomp uses to go to other realms and what
when
have you.
I'm not like well astrologically versed. Like I
Sure.
followed all the symbolism work, but it's just recently that I started like actually looking up in real life. Explain in more detail, like what do you mean when the bear hangs by the tail, or is that like a certain part of the year?
Yeah, so and it's funny because I've brought this up several times throughout the year. I really should, I should acknowledge when this actually occurs. I have a table somewhere in my collection here that actually tells you when the opportune time is.
I would
So
love to know.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. So the North Star is the star in the northern sky, which the heavens revolve around. And so, two constellations that are really close to the North Star are Ursa Minor and then Ursa Major. So each of these constellations have seven stars to them. They're called asterisms. So Ursa Major is it's a constellation. It's the Great Bear, but the Little Dipper or the Dipper within it, the Big Dipper, is known as an asterism. So it's part of this larger constellation. But when you look up to the northern sky and you see the seven stars of Ursa Minor, the seventh star that is the handle of the Little Dipper is the North Star. So this constellation just revolves around the North Star. Further away is Ursa Major, which also has seven stars and also looks like a dipper. And so you have the Little Dipper close in to the North Star, the Big Dipper further out, and that goes around the Pole Star. So it's really interesting that it goes around the Pole Star and it kind of looks like a number seven. And you've probably seen this because you're familiar with my work, but it's my understanding and a lot of people's understanding is that this is where we get the swastika from. So the swastika comes from Ursa Major going around the pole star, and you're looking at it once a season. You're going to see the four arms of the swastika, basically. And so the swastika is one of the most holistic, beautiful symbols we have out there, pretty much. Which is why it's my understanding. I believe that there is a campaign against the swastika. And generally, I'll say that there has been a campaign against Northern symbolism and also against Northern peoples too. And so this is a whole nother rabbit hole, I think. But I think that there's so much information tied to it. It's so holistic and it reveals so many things that I think that there are certain groups that want to kind of keep a lot of this stuff suppressed. And so when the Great Bear is just beneath the pole star, it goes around, it makes one full rotation throughout the year. When it's just beneath the pole star, is what this book was claiming is to be the best, most opportune time to use this northern gateway sort of
Beneath,
thing.
would that be south of in this case?
Yeah, yeah. If you're gonna look at it, it would be south. Yeah, exactly.
So this is
And
once a
so,
year.
yeah, so once a year.
Is it like
So
one
that
day a
book,
year, or is it a longer window?
I think that there's a honestly, the book is pretty specific with the tables. And so it to me, when it comes to a lot of this magical working stuff, I tend to have more of a flexible sort of approach. So there's some people that they're on it by the millisecond, and to them, they have to do certain things at very specific times. With my practices, but I'm also not a ceremonial magician or anything like that either. So I'm way more flexible and loose, and I tend to be way more organic with these sorts of things. So, but I can't say definitively, if you want to be precise, by the second or by the minute like that, because that could very well be something that is really important that I'm overlooking, but I've never given it a shot, so I can't really say.
Okay.
But this book gets into a number of different cultures that revered the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. And there's also another book called Stairway to Heaven.
So that
Go
was
ahead.
actually a fictional book, right?
No, it's nonfiction.
Okay, but it's about the Lovecraftian universe.
Well, so that's the thing. It's
So it's like a
really,
non-fiction about something that people will call fiction.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
So
for
that's
people who are listening who don't know any of this, H.P. Lovecraft is one of the most famous sci-fi writers of all time, and he came up with this sort of universe that there's a subculture of people who worship these beings as actual gods. And there is also a theory that I do think is kind of gaining ground that, as Mario alluded to, the beings of the Lovecraftian universe correspond with the pantheon of the Sumerians, and some people think that these are the actual gods of the Sumerians who made themselves known to Lovecraft through his dreams, and that his work is based on his dreams, where he'd already met these quote unquote real beings. That's of course speculation. Now, Mario mentioned a book by a guy named or called Simon. That's a pseudonym for Peter Levenda, who's a peculiar character.
Yeah,
by
exactly.
By all implications, he's what you would call an agent. That doesn't mean that the info is inaccurate. I mean, info is being disseminated in all kinds of weird ways. But it's like a little murky. I feel like the intentions of Peter Levenda is they're somewhat unclear.
Well, so here's what I learned, because I felt like I needed. It's so funny that we're talking about this, because I just did a show about H.P. Lovecraft a couple days ago with someone else, and then I was invited to do another show about a post Lovecraftian, post Crowleyan magician. His name is Kenneth Grant, and he's one of the big guys who kind of put some of this work out there, and regarding the northern sky and the Lovecraft deities, the old ones and ancient ones and everything else. Pretty much what I've come across is that I think when you're dealing with some of these black magical groups and figures, the information you're going to come across, and this includes Freemasonry as well, by the way, that I think that once you start kind of like pulling off the layers of symbolism with Freemasonry, even with like the Ordo Templi Orientis and the Golden Dawn and stuff, once you start peeling off these layers, you are going to find northern symbolism. And so that's just the deal. That's just my understanding, is that you're actually finding out about geocentric occultism. So heliocentrism and sun-based worship, and even astrology and all this stuff that's more solar centric, that's more of an exoteric understanding, excuse me. So solar symbolism is more exoteric, polar symbolism is more esoteric. And even people who run in these esoteric circles, a lot of the initiates aren't even aware of this dynamic at all. You kind of really have to search for it, and you have to, be on the hunt for the deeper layers of understanding. So to your point, I think Peter Levenda is a person of interest who should be questioned because of some of his affiliations and everything else. But it would also make sense that he would actually be speaking about some of this material, because he is somebody actually in the know with certain things. And so yeah, I have no allegiance to him, and I don't in fact, I've heard some very seedy things about him that I won't repeat here, but I've heard that he is someone that you should be kind of cautious of. And some of the things that some of the projects he's been affiliated with over the years, definitely my red flags go off, sort of thing. But that's just the pattern that I've noticed, is that a lot of these guys, it actually turns into polar symbolic sort of worship, or they have an understanding of some of these dynamics and everything. So, but he's one of the guys that has overtly talked about some of this stuff, which I find to be really, really fascinating. He did that in that book, and then he also has another book called Stairway to Heaven under his actual name, Peter Levenda, and he talks about ascension texts and ascension material that basically has everything to do with the northern sky, pretty much, from all over the world. So those are two books that I've read that have really kind of changed my sort of perspective on a few things regarding all this stuff. But he's not the only one that has said this. There's other material that I have that it has pretty much, said very similar sorts of things. But I find his work valuable for a few reasons that way.
So my next question is similar to the last one, but
Yeah.
different topic. But I heard you speak a few times about the theory that people are meeting in quote unquote mental temples or
Mm.
non-physical temples.
Hmm.
So I have a two-part question for that.
Sure.
First is do you have any kind of source? And second is do you have any personal experience with it?
Gotcha. Good stuff. The sources are there's a handful of different sources you can look into regarding all this stuff. Actually, I'm not sure if you've checked out the Juan on Juan show, but he's put out several episodes. This was a rabbit hole that he went down about these mental sort of palaces or temples or universities or whatever. And so specific books that I have relating to that, it's actually really funny because we're going to go right back to Peter Levenda because he's talked about some of this stuff more plainly than a lot of other groups. So there's a lot of other groups where it's very cryptic, kind of what they're saying, but in his Stairway to Heaven book, he talks just about it like, very matter of factly that as an example, there's a sect of esoteric Judaism where it's called Merkaba mysticism, which is basically chariot mysticism. And their whole entire belief is that they ride their chariot, their symbolic chariot, to the north, and then they descend or ascend to a temple, and then they do various workings, and they literally have like meetings, and they perform different things together there, and then they return. So going up to a mental palace, is very it's not sustainable. You can't be there forever, so you're going to come back. And so what he says in this book is that a lot of these different groups where you ascend to this kind of communal location in the north or just like generically in the heavens, that you're not going to be there forever. So the idea is to go there, perform whatever you need to perform, do whatever you need to do, return. And then oftentimes the idea is that you share what you learned to people here on the ground, to people here on Earth. And so he gets into a lot of this material. There's a woman named Tracy Twyman. I'm not sure if you've looked into her work, but she has this whole entire idea of this what she refers to as, I know it's ultra, beyond ultra, plus ultra, excuse me. So this idea of plus ultra and that there's more beyond, that's kind of one of her quotes that she kind of put out there. But she did work on a lot of this stuff as well, that there are places and there are realms that you can access, but we, most people living in this reality, they're going to think that they're not even going to realize that this is even a possibility, but that this is actually a tradition in certain, occult circles where they actually have a communal place where they go to, and they communicate and do all these other things. The other thing
So,
too. Go ahead.
sorry.
No worries.
I just wanted to ask you, like, say if you think about one of these, you don't have to say any names out loud or whatever, but
Yeah.
you have like you imagine like what you just referred to as an occult group. They have their
Mhm.
communal place, which is non-physical, or at least it's like not here. If you and I went there tonight, do you think we'd be welcome or warded off?
I don't think we would be welcome, personally.
Okay.
And so I don't even know if we would have the right, map to even get there, sort of thing. So sometimes some people have referred to this also as an invisible college as well. And I think the term invisible college can have a couple of different meanings, but this is one of my understandings, is that I think I was reading about the Rosicrucians one time, and they kind of have this concept of an invisible college that they will meet at and everything else. But my guess would be that they would have some sort of they would have something in place, some sort of security in place, to prevent you from actually probably entering, or that if you did enter, that they would know you're there. And so I think some of this stuff probably as well. It seems to me like when I was doing my research on remote viewing, that there were things kind of like this that I was coming across as well. That people have, if you train yourself, you can have amazing abilities that where I can read, the piece of paper that's on your desk right now, as an example. And so I've read several books about remote viewing, and it seems as though that this is a real phenomenon that people kind of have, that you can actually, work like a muscle and everything else. And so I've also met people who have said that they've met teachers, in like a kind of etheric sort of classroom, and that they actually received lessons from this teacher while they were there. And so I've met a handful of people that have said kind of similar things like this. So to me, it does seem feasible, and I could see why a group would want to maybe conduct themselves this way, right?
For those who want a more mainstream example of the last thing that Mario mentioned, like meeting teachers and stuff, uh, Carl Jung is very much like accepted by the mainstream and
Sure.
as one of like the founding fathers of modern psychology. And he was smart enough to shut up about it while he was alive. But he had a very legendary book called the Red Book,
Mm.
where he wrote like all his personal uh, experiences and musings.
Mm-hmm.
And the book was super legendary while he was alive. It was like only a handful of people had gotten to see it, and they were like wowed by it. But he was like very, very selective about who he let view the Red Book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But he would say that all of his other work was influenced by the info that was in the Red Book.
Mm.
And the Red Book was put out not too long ago. I think it was 2010. So now it's like official. It's in the Red Book. Like his main teacher is a guy who was alive, like more than 1,000 years before him.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
yeah, I don't remember the name now, but he has like a different name for him, but it's clearly implied that it's the same person as Simon Magus. Uh, and they meet regularly, they take walks, and he explains stuff to him. And this
Wow.
is what modern psychology is based on.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it
You
is.
know,
There's
this gets
a.
into, go ahead.
I just wanted to say for people who want to follow up on it, there's a website called gnosis.org where you can get for free uh, of four lectures by Professor Lance Owen on the Red Book.
Mm-hmm.
They're quite interesting because it's hard to get a copy of it. Like it was I think 500 copies. They were very exclusive. I don't know if there's been like a second edition, but it's obviously not a book that a lot of people have access to. Um,
Right.
anyways, my next question is a little. I just want to know how you understand yourself because when you do your live streams and stuff, you come across as very sort of scholarly,
Mm.
but sometimes you allude to your own personal practice. So I wonder, how much do you consider yourself like a practicing magician compared to a scholar in more an academic sense?
Well, I mean, how I look at myself, I feel as though at my core, I'm more of an artist, or you mentioned magician. I would say that's appropriate, or even occultist. And so, but honestly, I look at myself more as an artist. And so I feel like I'm creating when I'm doing the live streams. And I don't really look at myself as a scholar, to be honest. I just have an interest in symbolism. I've been a graphic designer for 20 years. And so I started off my life by illustrating quite a bit. and I was very creative. I'm very right-brained, type of person. I tend to be more emotional than not, versus I feel like I have my fair share of being, I'm analytical as well, and I have my left brain sort of intact. It's there, but I'm way more right brain. I'm way more of like an art guy. And so that artistic sort of leaning got me interested in symbolism, basically, because I was in Photoshop and I was always designing things for people, and I refined my eye over the years, and there was just certain shapes that I was kind of intrigued by, and I wanted to know, it's like, well, what does it mean when I create a pentagon or something like that? And I started getting into tarot and astrology years ago, and I was so blown away that I was able to incorporate some of what I was learning into my design career. And it was actually like practical information of how to make something look softer, how to make something feel more holistic, how to give something an edge, how to make something come across a certain kind of way. And so I realized that my symbolic studies, that it was actually helping me as a graphic designer, and it was helping me kind of refine, some of the things I was creating for clients with branding and things like that. And so that really is what propelled me to this point, with everything basically, was just like my artistic sort of sensibilities. So that's generally how I look at myself. And I think a lot of scholarly people, depending on how strict they are with everything, or how, depending on their methodology, I think that, I'm kind of aware that there's people like that who really don't care for my approach, because really what I'm doing is I tend to see the similarities over the differences with everything. And so that's kind of the symbolic approach too, in my opinion, is I'm looking at how, I put up my first, my finger right here, my index finger. I look at this and I see the comparison being made with the spine, the world axis, the phallus, the trunk of a tree, all of these different things, the pole, the sword, the wand, etc. Someone who maybe is more scholarly, perhaps they might see things that way, but I feel like my right brain sort of way of looking at everything, tending to want to unify everything, it's definitely not for everybody. But that's just the approach that I've kind of, put together over time. So yeah, no, I definitely don't see myself as a scholarly sort of person. I can hang with certain people like that, and I appreciate a lot of their work and research. And I have a lot of people that are very much like that I admire, but I don't consider myself in that camp really.
So the work you present is mainly relating to the stars, but I get the feeling that your practice sort of outside of your research. I get the feeling that you're much more of a tarot reader than an
Hmm.
astrologer. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that's correct. Yeah. Yeah, that's
So
accurate.
tell me about your journey with the tarot, like what got you into it, and what made you want to like continue and refine it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's funny, it came through design, through graphic design, as so many things in my life have really. Um, I had a friend who was a programmer, and he programmed a tarot reading website. I think it's actually tarot.com. Literally, it's like the biggest tarot website out there. And so that was a business that was local to where I was living at the time. He was programming for them, and at some point he said, "Hey, I think I could do a better job than what they're doing. How about you help me design a tarot website, and we can do these readings and it'll be great and blah blah blah." And so he said, "I would love for you to be the graphic designer, but if you're going to design the website, you should know how the system works." And I said, fair enough. That makes sense. I had never picked up a tarot deck. I had never read a book on tarot, anything like that. And he went to the bookstore. He bought like 12 different books on the tarot, and he let me borrow a few. And the first book I opened and started reading, it blew my mind what they were saying about really simple things like the cup, cup symbolism. What does that mean? Why is it related to the emotions? Why is it related to water and all these other things? And so I was just completely blown away that I thought I knew something about symbolism because I had gone to film school and I was a graphic designer for years, that I just was hooked immediately. I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay, there's something here." And from then on, I bought my first tarot deck. The first deck I got was the Crowley deck because that was the artwork that was being used in that book. I didn't realize kind of like how infamous that deck was and how influential Crowley really was even at the time. I just thought it was a cool looking deck. And from then on, it's just been a study that I've integrated, and it's something that I really have gotten so much out of over the years that it feels to me it's kind of like the gift that keeps on giving, because it opened me up to astrology, it opened me up to aspects of numerology, it opened me up to some of the esoteric stuff with Hebrew, because it really is a complete system. It's there's mythology, psychology, color theory, all of these different things. And so it kind of has been my base. And even though I've looked at other systems, and I still revere these systems too in their own way, but like the I Ching was something that I've definitely spent my time with. The Norse runes too, something that I really have an appreciation for, and I think is fantastic. But I kind of always keep on returning back to the tarot. And I think that's probably for a few different reasons. Although I will say, with all of the systems that I've looked into, including tarot, I feel as though I can criticize the things that I still appreciate. So I see a lot of people out there using tarot in ways that I personally don't think are very helpful or useful. Same thing with astrology as well. And so I love astrology. I love the symbolism behind it. I love all of the different things that I've learned from it, but I've never quite, I've never gotten to the point where I felt like I wanted to do natal chart readings or, anything like that. And even astrology too is just like a label or a term. It's so big. It's like saying like, I don't know, music or something. It's like there's so many genres of astrology that I've realized that there's lots of different pockets of astrology. There's some people that are really obsessed with this angle or that angle or whatever. Mine just always happens to be kind of the symbolic angle, I guess. And yeah, and the tarot really opened that up for me. Also, too, I just realized that the tarot was a really great way for me to tap into my own subconscious and for me to kind of have like conversations with my higher self, if you want to call it that, and be able to develop a deeper relationship with self. And so the tarot has helped me do that for sure, I would say.
Do you do divination for yourself?
I do, but I don't. My philosophy with divination is I think you're better off using it as a tool to reflect instead of using it as a tool to project. And so a lot of people, when they first get into divination, they want to know if they're going to get with this guy or girl. They want to know if they're going to get the job. They want to know all these different things that are happening, down the road. And for me, I actually think that you would get more out of using it as a tool to reflect upon self, maybe reflect on an event that just happened, or if you're going through something, I think that you can use it to help process the event. But I don't think it should be used for answers. I don't think it should be used to try and predict the future. I don't think it should be used for fortune telling purposes, basically. And so that's how I tend to use it for myself is to reflect and not necessarily to get answers for anything. It's more so a means to kind of refine your thinking with something, I think,
Can
in a
I
lot of
ask why
ways.
you're skeptical about the fortune telling?
Because I think that I just don't think the future is written, basically. And I think that there's a quote that I lean on quite a bit, and I found it to be true for the most part. And I think that it's worth sharing here. And it's basically that if you find yourself thinking about the future too much, you're going to be prone to anxiety. If you're thinking about the past and you're ruminating on the past, you're going to be prone to depression. But if you're in the present, you're prone to peace, basically. And so I think a lot of people who are stuck in the future, they tend to be a little wound up and they tend to be, they're worried about what might happen. And I think a lot of people worry and project, what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, the next month. And I found that that is a huge problem with astrologers. And I found that that's a huge problem with tarot people, is that they just want to know, they want to know what's
Yeah.
going to happen, and if, I feel like a lot of astrologers, they talk about this upcoming week, this forecast, or this conjunction, or this celestial alignment, or planetary alignment, or something like that. And they're always talking about what's happening, what's happening, what's happening, what's happening. And to
Mm.
me, I just feel as though you should maybe I think there's better time. I think there's better use of your time. I think that you would actually be better off, perhaps, if you're so worried about something, maybe do something that's going to help your situation instead of waiting for the right alignment, or instead of
Yeah.
waiting for the right omen, the right tarot card to tell you that things are going to be okay.
Yeah, it kind of depends on how magical your view of how the tarot works is.
Hmm.
If you tap into the unconscious and the unconscious is not bound by time in the same way, then I personally can see why there would be some value to uh, predictive stuff as well. The way I've been in my life, I've been going hella back and forth. Like, if I even believe in free will, is everything written? Is it not?
Hmm.
Uh, and uh, I guess you can't come much further than, if free will exists, it's very hard to make logical sense of it or explain it in any way. But if it doesn't, you still have to live as if it does. So, like, it has no sort of practical application at the end. But I feel like, uh, to me, the tarot is seems to be made from the perspective that I logically always had the biggest problem with, which is like a middle position. Because I feel like logically it has to be like everything's set or everything is in play. And undecided. It's very hard to like resonate your way to a middle ground between those. But I
Mm.
feel like the tarot still operates from what I think is also like maybe more of a classic medieval uh, way of thinking, but it's like uh, based on choices. Like, you're in
Mm.
a situation where you have to make a choice. If you do this, then that can happen, and if you do that, then this can happen. So to me, it's like, if tarot works, which I have recent experiences that sort of imply it does, and I suddenly feel called to work with it, which I never did before. I'd just been studying it for, symbolic purpose and like historical interest and stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I feel like, uh, if you look at like a Celtic crossbred, and you have the outcome of card number
Hmm.
10, but you have like a lot of stations on your way to the 10th card. So say if you get like uh 7 of Swords on your outcome, and people might say, "Oh, it's not looking too good, right? It's not the card you would hope for as your outcome, at least if you like associate the swords with some kind of friction and strife, and a lot of people associate the 7 of Swords with like deceit, and I've recently been quite inspired by Dr. Stefan Heller. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's an interesting character. He's 92 years old, but he still lectures every Friday. He's a master mason of 60 years, and he's a bishop in a Gnostic church that he describes it as a pre-Nicene church. And he's put out several books on the tarot. But he associates the 7 of Swords with what he calls larcenous pleasure, like pleasure that involves somehow like the taking away from someone else. So let's say that, as for most people, that would not be the ideal card for them to have as the outcome. but you still got these 9 other stations. And the way I understand the tarot system now, I think that it's like, well, we can sort of disregard the card that's already the recent past because there is nothing you can do about it. But you got the other 8 cards, and I feel like now it's like the way you handle those 8 stations. Like, say, you at the bottom of the road to the right, you get the Justice card. Or maybe there's an emerging theme of justice in your subconscious. Maybe you would have to be just to someone to sort of get this right or whatever. Like, based on how you handle those other stations, there could be more or less of the outcome. Like the deceit could be more severe or less severe, sort of. I think this is a very exciting worldview, even though I can't say it makes sense. Like, I've been like all in my head my whole life, sort of doing philosophy stuff, and I can say that logically it's very hard to, because in reality there's like 1,000 choices every second, right? It's hard to make the case that you actually have like binary choices or choices with only 3 options. But at the same time, when it's condensed into the cards and you feel like you know what choice they're talking about, so I'm more drawn towards this view now, which is like a very live interplay between you and life, with sort of like a live mediator.
Right. Oh, that's great. Yeah, no,
and if this is the case, then I think also doing like divinations about the future is sort of more permissible, if you get me.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's one of these things where there's so many different ways to use the tarot, and there's so many different divination methods as well. You know, people have been, they use tea leaves and they use organs, or they use bones or whatever. There's so many different things. People, there's divination that I've seen with birds, and how many birds fly overhead. You sit somewhere still, and then there's certain things about what way they're going, and how many there are, and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
and so to me,
Norway, we have Americans maybe don't know, but there's a native people in Norway called the Same people, or in English you would say Sami. They're known for doing divinations in their leftover coffee.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Right. So there's so many different ways to use divination and to read the signs and symbols and stuff, that I definitely wouldn't say personally that there's just a flat out wrong way or right way of doing it, because it's way more. It's a whole big wide spectrum. I would say that my opinion about the futuristic sort of fortune telling aspect of it, probably a lot of my opinions actually were bred out of how I was seeing people use divination, astrology, tarot. And I feel like a lot of people want like a temporary sort of answer to something. But what I was seeing is that people want the comfort of a reading without doing the work. So I feel like a lot of people sometimes use astrology as a means to avoid doing personal work, or maybe the difficult work, kind of delaying negative emotions.
I feel like it's
with
kind
whatever
of
task.
opposite. Like the tarot will force you to do the work and like expose you to the consequence if you don't, sort of. Maybe I'm too like conscientious. I don't know, but I've had experiences myself as of quite late where I feel uh, I feel like this applies to me, and if it does, then right now I think I'm sort of at is it 6 of Swords, where the character is blindfolded and tied?
Is it 6 or 7? Yeah.
Is one of those. Yeah, if it's 7, then the larcenous one was the 8. That's my bad. But the larcenous one is the guy sneaking away with the swords from the military camp.
Right.
But anyways,
yeah, you're thinking of the 8 of Swords.
okay, but now I'm thinking about the card with the woman who's she's tied, her eyes are covered.
Yep,
I
that's the
think
eight.
this
Yeah,
is. Hmm?
that's the eight of swords.
Okay, yeah. So I felt like I saw a spread that I really felt like represented my position like too accurately for me to sort of not choose to believe it.
Yeah.
And if my analysis was correct, then I was at like the Eight of Swords. For
Mm,
those who are not familiar with the tarot, this is a woman. I don't think the sex is too important, but her eyes are covered, and her hands are tied, and there are a number of swords to her right and her left. Uh, the way I interpret this is the person is forced to make a choice. They're making a choice in a position where they feel like they're somewhat bound and they don't know all the info that would be relevant to their
mm,
choice. So
mm-hmm,
that's the covering of the eyes. Like it's something that if they knew it, maybe they would have chosen differently, but they have to take a choice before they know all the info. And it's implied by the card, if you go in one direction, it's going to be a lot of problems. But if you go in the other direction, it's going to be a few problems. There's like no easy way out of this.
mm-hmm,
For me, I feel like that personally was like real helpful. Like it helped me uh, go through the problems,
mm,
assuming that I made the right choice and that I would have more problems if I'd done otherwise.
mm-hmm.
But had I not seen this, I don't think it would be as easy for me to like wait out the hardships.
Yeah, and I think that that's a beautiful way of putting everything and using tarot and all of that. And I think I guess part of my whole hesitancy with the futuristic thing is that some people want to use tarot as a yes no sort of thing. Should I move? Yes, no. Versus seeing what's the energetic quality that I need to understand moving forward regarding the situation. I think that's kind of like a healthier sort of approach. And I'll just say some of my hesitancy about the futuristic thing comes from my time in, for the lack of a better word, I guess, the conspiratorial realm online and the truther realm online. Because ever since I started getting into alternative information, which has now been, I don't know, it's like maybe 15, 16 years or something like that. So many times I've heard on this date something's going to happen, on that date something's going to happen, shit's going to hit the fan, whatever, in October, or no, now it's December, or no, there's a grand solar minimum, or there's going to be this big earthquake, or World War III is starting, or whatever. There's all of these different things that I've heard so many different times that just over time I realized that nobody actually checks in on what they were predicting months ago. Nobody checks in about their prediction last year and says, oh, you know what, a lot of the stuff that I was talking about, posting links about, it actually never happened. And then some really big event happens and nobody ever saw it coming, like the last few years with the whole pandemic, and everything else. And so for me personally, I just kind of realized that instead of forecasting and being so anxious about forecasting things and trying to figure out if this guy is prophetic or if this woman is telling the truth about what's happening, I'd rather just kind of be as present as possible and use the tarot to understand myself right now. And maybe that'll affect how I choose to proceed with any future sort of situation versus directly trying to understand what's going to happen next month or something like that. So I'd rather just use it internally for something that's actually going on right now, versus all this other stuff, or even the past, because the past has happened, and so you kind of have an understanding of like how something did play out. And so maybe there's still some information with your recent history that you're still chewing on or still trying to, work through or whatever. I think tarot is great for that. But to each their own, however people want to use it, I think that's great. And if, as long as you're getting value out of it and you think it's actually, helping you, I think that's the most important thing personally.
I feel like I'm getting value out of it. Ultimately, I don't know, because like could be I made the wrong choice, and there was one that there was no strife connected to, but yeah,
Right.
that just depends on how far you will go, as to like how much information the subconscious can access,
Hmm.
and what level of random plays in. Ultimately, we can't know that. Actually,
Right.
using Turo is quite new for me, although I've been like working on understanding it for quite some time.
Hmm.
But uh, ever since I was like 20, which is, that's a couple 20 years ago now. That's when I landed at the conclusion that there probably was no free will, and absurdly enough to most people, that sort of led me to do a little bit of like super uh, unrefined divination.
Mm.
I just started like flipping a coin to make decisions. So I figured like if it's written, there's no point in going back and forth. So I started flipping a coin like almost every time I was genuinely torn at the age of
Yeah.
like 20. And it was a great practice because it lets you know also when you're not genuinely torn. Like if you're like really hoping for one of the answers, perhaps you shouldn't flip the coin. Like, uh,
That's right. Yeah.
but over time, I felt like it was not random. Like the coin always makes the right choice, and I've never uh, purposefully like quote unquote gone against its advice. There was one time in my life where I was like, I actually interpreted wrong, like what side I was seeing. I saw the coin later on because I hadn't actually picked it up, and I was like, oh, that's why. But I never like quote unquote asked its advice and didn't follow it. Uh, and this is like, fucking 20 years of flipping a coin like several times a week, uh, to make small and big decisions. But just because I'm a sort of very mental person, so it would be easy for me to get like caught up in the back and forth. Did I make the right decision? What decision is the right one? And like, I'm also a little bit prone to perfectionism. So it's been very nice for me to have like something to just, once I flip the coin, that's it. No, we don't debate it anymore. It's allowed me to move on. Uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah. I
I
do the exact same thing, to be honest. I have a coin as well, and I've been using it for years. And if there's usually I make it for smaller decisions, to be honest. If it's a bigger decision, to me, I feel like I need to internalize something a bit more or work through the decision making process more. But for smaller things, I also have a coin, and it's been very interesting what it's chosen for us to do or for me to do. And I don't, when I flip it though, I don't know if you feel the same way. When I flip it, I'm not thinking that the coin is necessarily making the right decision. It's just making a decision. And so, but generally, once I play out the decision, I feel as though it's the right one. I feel as though there's some sort of validation that comes with, continuing to do X, Y, or Z. Sometimes if I'm going on a hike or whatever, I'm like, should I keep on going? Should I stop? Should I turn? Whatever. I'll flip the coin. It'll say keep on going. And then generally I don't regret, whatever it tells me what to do. But I don't know. I might have to think about
I'm
this a
of
little
the
bit more.
belief that my subconscious actually knows like what it takes to make the coin land on a certain side.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm leaning towards it not being random, but like actual sort of advice. Uh,
Yeah.
of course, I
No, I
don't
can
know
see that.
that,
Right.
but I will say, like statistically, uh, over the years, if I have uh, uh, asked the coin, should I smoke or not? Like, is it the right time? It's very, very liberal, but not at all for sugar. Like, no, no, you shouldn't. No, no,
That's
you
interesting.
cannot have a Snickers. Like, so it's
Right, right.
uh, to me personally, this is like way beyond. statistical likeliness.
Mm,
But of
mhm.
course, it's just a subjective experience.
Sure, sure.
I love the interview so far, Mario. I feel like I should know how much time you have, so uh, I don't make like mistakes and I don't get through everything I want.
Yeah, no worries, dude. I got another half hour, 45 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, because then I'll my quote unquote story is so special to me. I can't rush it. I'll probably use like half an hour. So then I should probably skip my other tarot questions because I had some, but that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Oh
It's
yeah.
great thus far.
Excellent, excellent. No, I'm having a great time. And I appreciate just what you're bringing to the table, your perspective, your skepticism, just your knowledge with certain things and stuff. And that's been one of the cool things is just connecting with people and seeing actually who is listening to my stuff or who values my stuff. And honestly, so many times I'm like, these people are really smart, man. They're like smarter than me with certain things. And I totally just respect them because of just their experience and all of that. So I just wanted to say that you're a great host, and this has been really interesting, and you're giving me things to think about as well.
Cool, cool. See, all right. So I guess I'll transition into quote unquote my story now, and hopefully I'll make it through it fast enough that maybe we can have like a little back and forth about it at the end.
Please take your time too. So
Thank you. So, thank you so much for the interview so far, Mario. It's been great. This is very holy to me. So excuse me for making it quite long, but it feels like something I can't rush through. Also, like I said, I've been through a very transformative event, but I didn't sort of plan for it or aim for it. So I don't really like. I can only speculate to which of the steps on my way there that were sort of important, or what parts of my story that are like relevant to the final outcome or not. But I would rather not exclude something that I feel like may potentially be relevant. Also, my steady listeners, they have sort of gotten a feel for my outlook as things have progressed, and they've heard me ask a lot of questions that come from what to most people would be like a slightly off perspective. But I've never really shared my sort of spiritual journey with my listeners. And feeling as though it has somewhat culminated now, or at least taken a rapid turn and changed into something that looks like doesn't include podcasting, I'll go through it now. So, excuse me if this comes off as like self-glorification, because I'm going to start at the age of 17. I know it's going to seem like I take myself very seriously, but at the same time, like, it's fucking my life. I cannot not take it seriously. And these are like events of the greatest magnitude to me personally. So here we go. This sounds cheesy, but I feel like for me personally, my sort of spiritual journey started with Tupac, quote unquote, died. I was like a huge hip hop fan at the time. He was my favorite artist. I had already gotten into like dabbling with raps myself. And I was very surprised. Like, I was old enough to notice there was a lot of weird things about that event. Like, it didn't make any sense. It was like super famous guy getting shot on the open street, and then they cremate the body before they do an autopsy, even though it's against the law. And then it's insurance, and nobody wants to cash out. And it seems to be hard to find out if there's even a grave or if there was even a funeral. I was very, and then, you know, the album that came out after his death, it's like so obviously alluding to the event of his death, and you realize they couldn't have like planned all this after his death, like making the cover, like this was clearly planned in advance. And it had weird hints of occultism, like on the cover of the Dark Illuminati album, it says executive producer Simon. Everyone knew the executive producer was Marion, quote unquote, Suge Knight. Obviously, Simon is like a role or character, or they're alluding to something. And it felt like there was symbolism there that you could interpret and perhaps understand something. It was subtitled The 7-Day Theory, and there were generally a lot of sevens coming up in all the numerology. And this was like the early parts of the internet. I think it was 97. That was like my first encounter with quote unquote conspiracy theory. And it was my first time like feeling different, because the papers didn't write about it as I was like led to believe that they would do in such a case. Like, but they were clearly like actively covering it up. And all my friends who were like also Tupac fans, a lot of them, they just accepted it. He's dead. Like, no reason to ask any questions. Being like, you know, Elvis is alive, that was like a sort of a lunacy label that you heard growing up. And then, you know, I became one of those, no, he has to be alive, or at least there's something off people. So when I was 17, that was like my first encounter with sort of the feeling of being like really mentally sort of on the outside. At this point, I'd already like felt like school didn't really apply to me, and like I didn't envision a place for myself within mainstream society. But this was like the first tangible event where it's like, nah, this makes no fucking sense. How can you believe this? And that was like the first seed. And ultimately, you start wondering, like, if they're lying about this, how much are they lying about? And as you become a little older, you realize like the answer to that is pretty much everything. So I guess I was like in my early 20s when I was like, all right, I can't believe anything from school, and I have to sort of start filling in all the blanks. And the blanks are basically everything. And I guess I was driven by a feeling that if I can only find enough pieces to the puzzle, then I might be able to work out the picture. Because I always had an innate feeling that there has to be a purpose to this. So if everything they're telling us is false, then the purpose is somehow hidden, but I have to find it. I have to like make it out. And obviously, when you realize you can't trust what you were taught in school, you start going into quote unquote alternative sources. At this time, I didn't know anyone who was like into conspiracy stuff, or I had like no relation to anyone researching any of this shit. So I wasted a fuckload of time going down like rabbit holes that lead to nothing. Like, you know, Project Camelot was a big site in those days, promoting all kinds of bullshit. And I spent a lot of time on like alien bullshit and sitting up at night watching like secret space program conferences being live streamed from America. And it was like all kinds of fuckery. But you realize after a while that at least you've been studying the art of disinformation. And I felt like I became really good at spotting it after a while. Like, okay, this is the main story, but here's the second story for the doubters. And the second story can eventually become the main story after a while, like we're seeing now with the quote unquote lab leak becoming official narrative. And I felt like, okay, if I mostly wasted my 20s at least, and I was through the mill of your regular, you know, you start out with the Fritz Springmeier, and it's it's mainstream shit that you think is alternative at the time, right? Then as things progress, you become more and more of a crazy person to your surroundings, right? Every time you sort of open up about how you view things, ridicule awaits, right? So fortunately, like, I was so turned off by what I had sort of left behind that there was no ridicule that could make me turn around at this point. So I just walked through it, but it definitely strained my relationship with both my family and some of my friends. And the thing is also, I think a lot of people go through a phase where it's like, you understand shit that most people don't understand, you become a little preachy. And you can maybe bring it up in the situations where it's not too fruitful, and it's like people have to sort of keep you at arm's distance, and that's nobody likes to have their worldview challenged at a time they didn't ask for it, or at least most people don't. So you learn that as well, but then at the same time, it's like you're always shutting up about what you really think. So it's like you're becoming more of an actor or like a fake, and then every time you open up, it backfires. So it's like a good long period of like sort of philosophical solitude and like a spiritual loneliness, kind of. You feel more and more excluded, but at the same time, I was so driven by searching for truth. Like, truth was all I cared about, almost. And people who know me know my career. They know I was able to support myself from improvising rap since I was like 23 years old. So I've had a whole lot of free time on my hands every day, waking up, finding out about something, and never really having to, quote unquote, go to work like most people. My shows are quite short and they don't involve a lot of practice. So I was just like obsessed with trying to find the truth, but not really knowing where to look, just like flying from one flower to another like a bee. You become like you know a lot about a lot of things, but you're a master of nothing. You become like a generalist, but you hope that, this is, if I can only collect enough random truth, it's going to somehow help me crack the code. And looking back now, I feel like I've been working double shifts my whole life, like trying to crack the code of life in my head while I'm trying to like lead a somewhat normal life. But it's always like churning in the back of my mind. Like, people who know me, they notice like I'm never like embarrassed by awkward silence or anything, because it's like literally like it takes 2 seconds of silence and I'm off somewhere else. Like I'm never ever bored, but I've been sort of, I guess the older I got, the more I realized that there's a fucking lot to learn. There's if you get to ever make out the picture, you would be very lucky. I've had more and more of like a sense of urgency in my life, because even though it may sound hubris, and even though I do believe in reincarnation, I've had the feeling that I can make it on this try. Like, I've really never strayed away from that. Like, I feel like I can do it on this try, and I have to try to make it. Like, I cannot accept the fact that it's going to be in some other life if I don't at least give it my max on this attempt. And the older I get, the more you realize you don't know, but you still have this feeling like this is your shot. It's like a sense of urgency. Like, yeah, you're like churning so hard, trying to crack the code all the time. This has not been like a conscious decision I've made. It's just been like what has driven me to the point where, just like fucking taking a sip from a glass of water. If you have that moment where you're like thinking too hard about something else as you raise the water to your mouth, so you sort of you don't transition into drinking from breathing. You inhale the water. And that's happened to me like more than 500 times, like all the time, because I'm like so preoccupied with my sort of philosophizing that I can't like focus enough on drinking the water. And that's just one example, but like Lord knows how many house keys I left around the country. Like I've always been sort of distant from what's going on because I'm somewhere else, like trying to crack the code. And then as I guess maybe around 2015, 16, I felt like I was sort of banging my head against the wall. Like I didn't have any real progress as far as understanding things. I felt like by this time, I felt like I knew more than all the quote unquote conspiracy hosts or researchers online. Like I'm just hearing them rehash the same stuff that I found about 10 years ago, but they never get to actually mentioning people or like getting close to the core. Like it's always the same sort of beginner's curriculum. And I got bored with it and a little frustrated. But then something happened that as things progressed, a few people in my life started kind of taking me a little bit more seriously. Like they've sort of seen me be right about things enough times. They were like, okay, he's not like a complete lunatic. Of course, these are people who know me well, so they all consider me like a very intelligent and capable person, but they always thought like his views are crazy. But now see a few of them starting to think like, oh, maybe not. And suddenly there's like people calling me like, I want to hear what Nils has to say about this. And it's I get sort of treated with a slightly different level of respect, I feel like, by my surroundings, and it's a little bit encouraging. And I feel like at this point I'm sort of able to teach people a little bit, and they're actually receptive, whereas before I was like pushing it on people who were not. And it felt like that sort of got me looking back, I think that the fact that I was able to pass on some knowledge helped me sort of find some new input that was inspiring. And Mario would know about it. One of the shows that I came across that I really appreciated for the first time in a long time, like appreciating anything, was the RX Only Picture Show, which is a sort of a predecessor of the Weaving Spiders Welcome podcast that Mario features on. And the RX Only Picture Show was like those two guys, Jim and SB, were like, at this time I'd become really disinfatuated with alternative media and realizing that fuck, it's like all of them are, almost all of them are agents. Like it's really, it's just, it's the bookstore from 1984. But Jim and SB from the RX Only Picture Show, they seemed kind of like solid and quote unquote real to me. And it gave me a little bit of hope. And I felt like, oh, there's like someone like me out there. And SB was the first guy who I heard kind of voice opinions that I had, but I hadn't heard anyone else like say it out loud. And then this progresses. I feel like I'm having like some progress again with my own development, but also I have more people sort of reaching out, wanting to hear what I have to say about things. So this is like a positive development in my life. But as I'm approaching 40, this would be 2019, I feel like I'm a little bit disillusioned with my own endeavor to sort of crack the code. I feel like I've been always driven by the hunger for knowledge, but I've like never really been good at applying the knowledge to anything. Like when I realized I have to learn everything from scratch, one of the first things I did was learn about health. So I knew what healthy eating was when I was like 25. I started like dabbling with it practically when I was 35. typical for me to like, I was just happy with sort of the satisfaction of knowing, and then I went on. But I was like always, I wasn't taking my self-work seriously. And when I was approaching 40, I felt like I can't just keep on like frantically consume all this information with no sort of direction to it. And I felt like I felt like I know more than everyone around me. I have very little to show for it. Like definitely like not like worldly riches, but also, you know, not like a huge deal higher life quality. Like these suckers are happy being ignorant and they own more stuff than me. And I was like, I was kind of in a way having doubts if I played my cards right with the direction I took. But at the same time, it's like the truth is like all I cared about. So I didn't know what else I could have done. But I started feeling like I need something in my life that is of a practical nature, that involves actually doing something that could somehow make a difference. But I really didn't know what, because, you know, aside from this quote unquote searching for knowledge, what I've always been doing in my work life has to do with words. Like I'm great with, like, you would know Mario because I'm in my second language, but I'm very eloquent. So I can improvise raps, I can entertain people and stuff, but I have very little practical skills. Like I'm not naturally gifted in any sort of practical labor, and I've never done anything to develop it. So at this point, I kind of feel like I should be quote unquote doing something, but I don't know what. And I'm like, I feel like if you're gonna do your midlife crisis thing and become a carpenter or whatever, then it would be like a very long road for me compared to most dudes. Like, yeah. So I was like, I didn't know what to do, but I had the emerging sense that I needed to do something that was like taking action. I was pondering this in my 39th year. And as I was turning 40, I couldn't, like, even though it felt embarrassing, I like couldn't deny the notion that the only answer I had to this question, like, what do you want to do? If it involves doing something, the only answer I could come up with that seemed like cool and sort of satisfying and intriguing to me was, I want to be a trollman, which is a Norwegian word, but I guess wizard is the closest, or magician would be the closest translation. And I don't know any trollman. Like, I don't know. I don't have anyone to teach me how to do this. I have like no fucking clue. But it's the only endeavor that sort of intrigues me. And I feel like, you know, I may not have a clue about it, but the rest certainly don't. So I'm like at least not behind them. You know? So this sort of starts to grow within me. Like, I want to be a wizard, but I don't know what to do and how to do it, and I don't have anyone to ask. And I feel like the sources you can find, this may not be for good reason, but I have a lot of aversion to most of them. Like, I definitely don't feel comfortable. To me, it's like super goofy calling out Jewish names for like a deity in the sky, or like it feels weird for me, like just because Israel Regardi says Baba or whatever, like and I don't know. I felt like I had no teacher or no school, but like this is what I wanted to do, and I decided to like consciously say it to myself and to a certain degree the world. This is what I want to do, or pursue, without knowing how to, but just kind of hoping and trusting that life would show me. So after a while, this had like brewed within me. I felt like, fuck it, you can't just think about it. You gotta like try to somehow like get busy. So the date that I chose for what would be my first quote unquote magical ritual was equinox of last year. Now, by this time, I'd been like going through some different sources, and I know a lot about quote unquote brainwashing yourself for mental preparation for rap battles and stuff. So I've been like exploring how to put information into your subconscious already. And to me, I think that's kind of what you're doing with chaos magic. You try to condense your intention into a symbol, and then the symbol more easily slips into your conscious because it's a symbol. So I sort of had this little my own spin on what I guess you could call a ritual that I had envisioned, but I didn't know what content to put into it, like what to do with what would my intention be or whatever. But the date is approaching, and I'm well aware. I'm sort of hoping that I'll find out in due time. At this time, I'm in Bergen, which is the second largest city in Norway. It's on the west coast. I was touring there for a while, so I was walking around the city with the other vocalist in my group, Skrangleband, big shout out. He started asking me some questions about someone who's very close to me and their social situation. And he was just being concerned like a good friend would, but I was a little bugged out. Like I almost felt like he was being invasive. I got like a little defensive about it. So when he left me alone after I walk, I could tell like, ooh, there's something there, and this is what I should try to work on in the ritual. This is someone who's not me, but someone who I care deeply for in a really rough situation socially. It was really fucking with this person's quality of life. And I wanted to see if I could somehow try to do something for them. Once again, like not really knowing what I'm doing, but I have this plan in mind. And I'll say at least I had like a purity of intention and a lot of emotion put into that process, because I was very emotional after that conversation. And I can't remember exactly if this is the day of equinox or the day before, but that's when it came to me. This will be the topic, sort of. Did what I had envisioned, like sneaking around on a 9th floor balcony at the hotel, burning stuff. Like it was a little weird, but I did it. And when I woke up the morning after, I felt kind of different. Like I was a little more aware, like something had been like turned up a little bit, like, and I was like asking myself, like, wow, is this related to the ritual last night? Because if so, like, here we go. Like, and then 2 or 3 days after that, I got a phone call from someone close to me, not the person who is like the object of the ritual, but the person who called me knows both me and the person who was like the focus of the ritual. And the person who called me told me that this person had stood up to their bullies in a way that was like previously kind of unimaginable, and everything was like changed now. And this person has really had a different life since. And I'm not claiming the credit for that. Obviously, it was someone else who mustered up the courage to do what they had to do and change their life. But at least it was like the timing of events was peculiar enough that it made me want to continue to pursue this endeavor. Like it was encouraging, to say the least. Now this was for equinox, so I had to sort of work out a practice because equinox is only come twice a year, right? So it's not like you really know what to do after that. So I came up with this sort of rhythm where every new moon I try to in Norwegian we would say concretize. I don't know if you can like translate that, but try to like make my ambition or goal like into something specific. Hopefully just one word, and then I'll make the word into a symbol. And then I'll spend the next 2 weeks sort of charging up that symbol, do my little ritual on the full moon, and then I have like 2 weeks to sort of let it simmer and come up with like a topic for the next ritual. So that's like my rhythm. It has been like a very nice process of self-development. You get to sort of focus on one thing at a time and then just let them go. And I will not say that I've had like fantastical results in the sense that it's like it would prove magic to a doubter or anything like that. But I do feel like it's been somewhat working. And definitely one ritual I did to connect more with the plant world. I felt like I had a very different connection. It took a couple weeks, but then it came, and it was so different from what I had imagined that I sort of ascribed it to magic or something actually happened. Who knows? So at one point in my life, now I'm like 3 months into my first year of practice, a person reaches out to me. He's a colleague, like he's a two people who follow Norwegian rap closely. They know who he is. I didn't know him well personally. Like obviously we met through work in studios and stuff, but I didn't really know him. And he had been kind of slightly ridiculing my views a little bit in the past, like several years ago. But now he was reaching out based on my Twitter, and it was like, all right, so the world is kind of crazy these days, and you seem to be making more sense of it than most. So could we possibly like meet up once and discuss it? And we do. This is, I think it would be May or June last year. And the guy is super duper smart. So he's like one of those guys you can explain shit to him. He understands and he catches up really, really fast. And you can have like meaningful back and forth dialogue from there. So it's like, I met him, told him about the sky clock and stuff. And like literally the next day, he's already read the Book of Enoch. And he catches up real fast. He's real smart, but also he's more naturally prone to taking action and sort of diving in head first, which I'm not. So I go through the year, I do my little ritual practice. I stay in some contact with this guy who's now the first guy I know who's not into only like the quote unquote conspiracy stuff, but also like the more spiritual self-development, magical stuff. And typically enough, he messages me somewhere around the height of the winter, and he asks me about this Christos oil thing, which I've heard about the Christos oil numerous times because I've been around these alternative circles online, so I know like the theory well. But true to my nature, I never ever tried it, even though it only takes 3 days. You're gonna find out. But my friend tried, and he felt like there was definitely something to it. Now, for those of you who don't know, the theory is that when the moon is in your sun sign, you can, if you're fasting and you're celibate for those 3 days, so you're not like enjoying the pleasures of the flesh, then something is going to happen. They call it the Christos oil, but it's like this oil that supposedly comes from, I think, from your genital area. It rises up the back of your spine, and into the brain. But according to this, the Christos oil theory is like they say you can feel it sort of tingling in your nuts on day 1, and then you can feel it in your solar plexus on day 2, and then day 3 goes like into the brain. And my friend tried it out, and he said he felt like it worked. I'm a little bit skeptical about stuff like this because I feel like even though it works, there can be like an unnecessary layer of mumbo jumbo. So I'm like uncertain. Is it like, does it really have to do with the astrological timing, or does it have to do with the intention and the fasting? Because if it has to do with the astrological timing, then that would prove tropical astrology. That's what he was basing it on, and I'm a little skeptical about that. So I'm like standoffish, and I know like if you're masturbating hella times a day, you have to be celibate. Maybe you're gonna feel like some tingling in your nuts on the first day. It's like there could be other explanations to this. If you're not used to fasting, maybe you're feeling something in your stomach on the second day. Like, who knows? So I'm like a little standoffish, but whatever he experienced, like I believe it was something. It was like worth pursuing. So not too long after that, we had a case of what we call in Norwegian omgangssyke, or the pass around sickness, like where your children come home and they puke and you puke for a couple of days. And at this point, I've been like very well aware that I've been slacking on my fasting for a long time. So I let that be the spark. And I figured also, like, if I do my fasting now, I'm not at sort of the right place for the Christos oil thing. If something happens, I'll confirm that it was not the timing. So I was like a little excited about that too. So I did the dry fasting for 2 days, and then my third day I drank water, and then the third day I had kind of what felt like a little bit of a breakthrough. Like, is when you get sort of past the threshold on usually the end of day 3 is a euphoric feeling, and it's very like a weird sort of tingly feeling in your brain that you're not used to. So I was wondering, is this the Christos oil thing that he was talking about? Because it was a very particular feeling in my brain, and it was reminiscent of what he had described. He said, I can feel what part of my brain I'm using in a way I couldn't. So I was wondering, is this it? Because I sort of didn't feel the stage 1 and 2 with the nuts and the solar plexus, but I definitely felt something in my brain on day 3. And I had like a presence in my body. Like there's something almost like a ball of fire or light or whatever, something I can move around inside of my body. I wasn't used to this. Like, I've been doing a meditation every morning where you scan your face, you train your sort of awareness, your ability to focus on a little like spot of your body. But that was always like much harder. Started like fasting on day 3 or like boost up your ability to this focus. So like much more intense. And I enjoyed it, so I like sort of prolonged it a little bit by day 4, when I had figured I would start eating. I had like a glass of orange juice, and day 5 I had an apple. Day 6 I had 2 carrots, but I was like, oh, I ate very little. Could still sort of stay in this quote unquote, it feels a little holier when you have like this presence within you that you can move around, and it's like flowing through your body even when you're just sitting there. And it led me to think about, I've heard that Aristotle said the soul is sort of placed in the liver. So I thought about that a lot. Like, is it because my liver has nothing to work with and now we can like move around? I'm not sure. But anyways, it was a cool experience. I was leaning more towards maybe I had experienced the same thing that he did, but I was still unsure. now I'm approaching equinox of this year. And I feel like that's going to be like a special date to me because my quote unquote magical career started at equinox. But it's the same situation as last year, where it's like, I feel like I want to make something sort of extra out of it. It's not going to be like a regular full moon ritual, but I don't really know what intention or topic to sort of put into it. But I'm a little bit encouraged by this experience of fasting. And when I look into it, I see that whether you go by sidereal or tropical, if I do a week of fasting leading up to equinox, then I'm going to get both of those 3-day spans. So I'll be like good no matter what, because they're like back to back. It's hard to find info on when the moon is in Ophiuchus, by the way. So I decide I'll do a week of fasting, and hopefully that's going to give me like some inspiration and to what the actual ritual is going to be about. Now, as I'll have to go back a little bit because I'm not giving Mario his props, but as I'm going through this year, I guess being 40 and 41, I'm listening a lot to Mario's work, and as he comes across the polar stuff and explains it, I start seeing it. It starts making sense to me. And I remember, like, Mario has focused a bit on triangles, where you start seeing them as sort of the 3 points or Polaris at the top, and then the sun and the moon. And my parents took me, like, my parents go to church. I was visiting them, and I went to church with them once during this year. I'm not sure if it was Easter or if it was like a regular Sunday, but the priest was doing like a procession thing where he walks through the church and he's carrying a cross, and it's the kind of cross that has like sort of circles at the end of the flags. So it just appeared very sort of visible. I was thinking in my mind, like, yeah, it's the immovable mover at the top, and then it's the sun and the moon. I started seeing this like around the way, and I think Mario has pointed out too that if you see the Masonic logo, you can see it as the point at the top where they cross is the Polaris, and the crossing points between the, what do you call them in English again?
The compass and square.
Yeah, where they cross as the sun and the moon, right? So this is like I'm like binging everything that Mario puts out, and this is working its way into my cosmology, which was already geocentric for several years. Like I had an experience that felt like sort of a personal confirmation to me in 2017 when I took several photos of the sun, like 15 minutes after sunset. Like you could not see the sun with your eyes, but it was there in the camera. And that was like good enough for me. Like, okay, if I can photograph it, then it's not behind a curve. So I was already like cozy with the geocentrism and everything. But Mario's work explained a lot more about the central point and its importance, or at least that there's probably something important about it. And I started to seeing it around the way. Then, thanks to Jim from Weaving Spiders Welcome, I checked out a YouTube channel called Vibes of Cosmos, which I think is a Russian channel, and it has a very detailed and what appears to be like refined cosmology that I was very fascinated by. I've mentioned it earlier on the show. Like he's the guy making the case that the moon is a reflection of the Earth. You can actually see the map and stuff. Um I don't know where Mario stands on this, but the Vibes of Cosmos guy, he focuses a lot, or I haven't even like looked into it enough. I saw it a little and it like resonated so hard that I was like much quicker to implement it into my worldview than I usually would be. So I'll admit that the whole Vibes of Cosmos thing, I put it through less scrutiny than I usually would. And also, I don't really have a way to find out, right, what's beneath the earth and stuff, but it resonates with me. So, anyways, the Vibes of Cosmos guy, he incorporates and makes a very good case for the black sun that you know from mythology being underneath the earth, and the black sun is where the light emanates from. It shines sort of upwards and it hits the dome. And I, I, it sort of rang true to me. Started thinking about it a lot. Then I had like I started sort of felt like I started to see the fourth point everywhere, like the triangle that Mario made me see everywhere. It feels like that's the top part of the cross, but there is the bottom point of the cross, which is like a little further down. You don't really notice it, but to me, that's the black sun. And also, if you look at the Masonic logo, at the bottom point is sort of emanating up, right? So as we go along, I'm also incorporating this black sun underneath into my worldview. Now I'll skip back to where I was. So equinox is approaching. I'm doing my fasting, and it's harder than usual. Like already on the second day, I had like a really rough time. Like I threw up, and I was like, if I hadn't known better, I would almost feel like I was dying. Like heart's fucking racing away, even though you're lying still, and it lasted for a good 4 or 5 hours, like pretty intense. And I had a hard time motivating myself for this fast. It was like really boring. I was tempted the whole time. I didn't want to do anything for the first 3 days. I definitely didn't want to work, didn't have the inspiration to write anything, nothing like that. The first thing I started doing when I wanted to do something was I just wanted to make food, like fill the freezer, make sure you're like good when you're done fasting and the whole family is good. Like you're not going to starve for a long time. Then after I did that for like a day or two, I started kind of frantically cleaning the house. This is not typical for my nature. Like I'm kind of a messy person in the sense that if I don't remind myself, I'll like do one thing and then I'll just move on, like leave a mess behind because I'm like so focused on the next thing. And I'm like always doing something mental, so I haven't really been depending on clean surroundings to sort of be happy. It's been like a task of, you live in a family, you want stuff to work, you have to do it, but it's never been natural for me. This was like kind of like cathartic. How do you say it in English? Catharsis.
Yeah.
I felt like all I wanted to do was clean the house, and I was listening to Mario's presentations. I was bringing the computer with me. It's like I have super low energy, so it's like I have to take 5-minute breaks all the time. But there's nothing else I want to do, so just you get a lot of stuff done, even though you're going at a slow pace when you do nothing else, and you don't spend any time eating or cooking. You don't sleep much when you haven't eaten for 5-6 days. It's like you need less sleep. So I got a lot of shit done around the house. And during this period, like I said, Mario was almost the only thing I was listening to. But I was still wondering, like, what should I what should my ritual be about? Like, what should I put into it? And looking for, not having like what seemed like a pressing answer, I just landed on like, fuck it, I'm gonna do this one for sort of for myself. And what I will ask for is just more magic into my life. That's gonna be the theme of it. I'm no Mario, but I was like, for my level, super happy with the design of this particular symbol. And it's like, all right, it didn't feel like a big, I didn't have like a sort of a hint from life or anything telling me that this is like the topic, but I have nothing better. This is what I'm going for. And since I got this little altar in the woods, and my wife is used to me like going out every full moon, and it's like it'd be nice to get some tangible results, right? to know that you're like on the path. So day of equinox comes. I got everything ready. I've planned that like the particular timing of the ritual will be high noon, because that's like, it's so sun related. Like that would be like the particular point, sort of when the light takes over. And my wife was out for work. Like she would have to leave at 11, so it was like everything aligned sort of perfectly. I would have like an hour of solitude and prep. So that was what I was going for. And I went into my little office where I'm sitting right now, to do like, well, one last little detour. On this sort of road. One strange, like I haven't had many mystical experiences. I had one in 2009 or 10. It was a little quite intense. It took me to sort of a mental place, but I could access it the day after and the day after, but I didn't do it, and I just lost it. But I've been like, the last 10 years, I've been weirdly followed by repeating numbers, like double digits. Like it's weird how often if I look at a clock, it's like 11:11 or 11:10, but I don't count the zero, or it's like 16:16, or it's like, but repeating digits occur so often. Like it's not usual or statistically normal. That's like the one thing that I've felt like has been, I've never known how to interpret this, but I've taken it as like a little nod, like you're on the path, sort of, because I didn't know how else to take it. And when I got up on equinox, like I knew kind of this is the day when I woke up. I woke up before everyone else, but I was still lying in bed. I heard my son getting up. I go out to help him go out in the kitchen. I see the clock. It's 7 past 7. So I notice. It's like the first thing I see is 2 sevens. Then ship him off to school. I had sort of a few hours of nothing to do, like waiting for noon. Lately, I've been trying to improve my air, because due to some sort of kind of trauma from my childhood, I'm like, I don't have a good ear for pitch, and I should have in my profession. So I've been hanging out at this website called Toned Air and working on it a little bit. It improves quite fast. So I decided like, okay, I'll do that for a little bit, because I'm just waiting. I try to do what they call a perfect pitch test. You have all the notes, they play one, you have to press which it is. And I usually do 100 when I practice. I get a 77 out of 100. I noticed because it's the last numbers that were in my life was clock is 7 past 7, right? I do it once more, and I get 77 out of 100 one more time, which I'm not manipulating this, like I'm doing my best. It feels like it's it's getting noticeable. So all right, 11 o'clock comes, wifey leaves, I go into my office thinking I'm gonna do like a little sort of prep. Not that I actually know what to do, like I don't have any prep to do. I got a symbol written. There's not much to do, but I just feel like I should be sort of getting in the mood because it's getting close. I have nothing else to do, and it's only once a year, right? So I sit down in my office and I'm like, guess I'll try to meditate a little bit because that feels like appropriate. Now, I'm not at all an experienced meditator, as those of you who listen regularly will know from the Ubot episode. I've tried to meditate a little bit off and on, but just never, it just felt like nothing happened and I sort of gave up real early. But I got nothing else to do. So I sit down, do this sort of lotusy position, not really knowing what to do. And like, I guess I'll meditate. I sit there for a little while, like just thinking about the events that are ahead of me or trying to, I guess, get in the mood. And then a thought occurs to me that like, okay, so during this past week that you've been fasting and celibate, by the way, because I wanted to like max out. You've had the moon in your sun sign for this week of fasting and celibacy, regardless of sidereal or tropical. It didn't feel like anything particular happened because of that. But at this point, I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking about my friend who had this Christos oil experience or whatever, and I got nothing else to do, so I'm just thinking to myself, like, all right, might want to like place your focus down there a little bit at like the bottom of the root chakra. And I do, and it's like a surprisingly instant reaction. It's like, oh, all right, something's kind of happening. Like it's something is sort of vibrating down there in a way that I wasn't expecting, like way more instant than I thought it could be. So, okay, so I'm like not well versed in this world, but I'm like, I'm not stupid, so I understand that, all right, keep on doing this, like something is happening. So I just keep on sort of placing my focus down there, and it's like something is charging up. It's pretty hefty after a short while. Like it doesn't take a long time for it to and like I've been around enough that I sort of start wondering like is this fucking it somehow? Like, is this the Kundalini moment that I've heard people talk about or whatever? But I haven't really like read anything in detail on it. But it feels like it kind of has to be it. And I'm like, I know from my last experience in 2009, like I shouldn't be thinking about it. Like I should just be experiencing this. And the more I think about it, I feel like it intensifies more if I don't think about it, if I just experience it. But at the same time, it's hard not to think about it because you got this little voice in your head of like, oh man, this is crazy, right? Oh, this gotta be it. It's fucking happening. And then, oh, shut up, experience it. Like, oh. But I'm like, at least like trying to max it out, and it becomes pretty fucking intense. And like a kind of electric feeling. It starts flickering before your eyes, but with every time the intensity of the sort of electric feeling turns up, then the flickering sort of changes pace. And after a while, it's like it's more slow as well. And I get this feeling that I know from like it's the feeling of you're about to come. Like in the same way when you're about to throw up, like there's something that happens, you know, this is the point of no return. It's not gonna happen for a little while, but I'm like past the point of no return. That's the feeling that starts coming. Like I've only ever had this feeling when I'm about to come. And it's like it's a little bit sort of unfulfilling because it's like someone's tickling you. You sort of can't take it. But at the same time, it's a nice feeling. It's a little confusing, but then it fucking starts like it feels like I don't know. It's probably not sperm, but it feels like something is coming from your nuts. But and the muscle that you use to ejaculate is pumping, but it goes the other way, out the back, and it fucking pumps up your back, and it hits your brain, and I could feel it like really pulsating, and I'm more and more convinced, like, wow, this is fucking gotta be it, right? This is fucking crazy. And as I'm sitting there, I'm experiencing this crazy pumping up my spine. I'm thinking to myself, like, because I'm like, I want to fucking max it out. Like, you have a little bit of anxiety because you realize it's like once in a lifetime shit. Like, you don't want to make mistakes. So I'm kind of, my mind is like rushing, like, what do I do? And I'm like thinking, like fuck it, like you've studied your Mario Garza, you've done your vibes of Cosmos. So as I'm sitting there, having this fucking energy pumping up my whole back and like hitting my brain, I intentionally reach out, like calling upon the black sun, are you there? And then Polaris, hey yo, are you there? I'm reaching out right now. I got this crazy, because I've been listening to Mario talking about how the tree of life is really the spine too. Like it's so I'm thinking like, okay, I got this fucking crazy flow going from the bottom of my tree to the top, and this is like my internal axis mundi. So I try to like consciously reach out, the black sun, if you're there, Polaris, if you're there, like I got this stream going now, and I want to hook it up to your stream. Can I sit in the stream, like in the fucking axis mundi with my stream? And I feel like once I do that, it fucking turns up another couple notches, like instantly. Like, it was very, very intense. And it came to a point where it's like, so you can't take it because it's been like too intense for too long. This is not like a very long stretch of time. It feels long because it's like, it's a lot. But it's like it's getting kind of too much. So I was like leaning forward and like then I sort of quote unquote lost it, and I was able to go back there again instantly. Like I did it once more. It was kind of the same shit, like not anything less than a first from what I can remember. It's like, oh, I can still access this, like, and it was just a crazy experience that left me with like first and foremost like an intense feeling of gratitude and just bliss, and but also a feeling of sort of having been acknowledged, like all my strife and this just fucking around alone in the woods trying to do my thing, not really know, like I've been sort of seen and accepted. It was very, very overwhelming, like nothing I've experienced before. Like, wow, it's the sort of the confirmation that, at least for me, is like, now I can slow down. Like I don't have to search for the truth like I used to, because I feel like I've got like the most important answer, at least for now, which is like, I'm loved, I'm seen, I'm good. And I've changed a whole lot since then. Like certain aspects of my personality are very different, and one of those is this constant question asking that I was on, like trying to sort of fill the void of the knowledge that I needed. Now I get like a very different message from life. I feel like what I'm supposed to do now is experience life and enjoy the actual experience. And more so, if I want more knowledge, then I think it'll be more from sort of decoding this experience in a mystic fashion, more than looking outside of myself. And I've based upon the first experience that I had in 2009, I was like worried that I would like not do things right this time, that I would like sort of gain access to something and then lose it again. So I was wondering what to do. So I remained celibate for a good while after that, because you can really, like, when it happens to you, you can really feel that it's the reproductive energy. It's definitely is the sexual energy that goes up your spine and hits your brain. And in these periods of celibacy, I wasn't like completely not touching myself or my wife, but I didn't like go there all the way. And it's very different from before, like what they call, quote unquote, walking around with a loaded gun. That doesn't happen now. It's like I can sort of almost go there, fucking tuck it in, and it's like a few minutes that shit leaks out the back and into my brain. You get like a braingasm instead, which is like just as good in a way, but it's like you don't get the fulfillment of not being horny anymore, but you get something very different. And I feel like for the first week, I could absolutely tangibly feel this energy working in my brain. Like I get it up there, get the braingasm, I could feel it going somewhere. Like specific areas of my brain definitely being worked on. No doubt, I could feel it for almost the whole first week. And I was getting all kinds of weird little downloads that I feel like I didn't ask for. I just suddenly kind of knew things. And like I have a lot stronger intuition than I used to. Now I know when to do stuff, and like I would always over plan because I'm a perfectionist. So like when I got into fasting, my initial thing is like, all right, what's the perfect scheme? Like, when are you going to fast the next time? How long is it going to be? What do you eat the last day? What do you eat? Like, I would know my 10 next fasting periods, like, just because I like to sort of optimize. But now I know I don't need to know, because I know I will know when it's time to. And this is very different. And I understand people around me much better. Like, even my wife, we've been married for 17 years. She's like shocked at how well I understand her now. And, you know, she's an educated therapist. She's not clueless herself. But now she's like, wow. A lot of things are different. And I feel called now to work on myself more and be silent more and focus on stuff that's like within 10 meters of my body. And I feel like if I'm going to talk to people, then I'm going to mostly talk to people who want to ask me stuff. And if I ask them stuff, I think it'll be the aim will be for me to help them, not for them to tell me something that I need to know. And this sort of thing that happened to me, I've been able to access it since. Like, I do not want to sound hubris. I pray that it doesn't go away. I don't want to sound like I'm bragging about it. But I've been able to go there and do what I call sit in the stream every time since. it's not as intense as the first time. I think because I think if the floodgates don't close again, then you don't get sort of that huge load kind of. I can feel something like leaking up, like when I'm not doing this, what I call sitting in the stream too. That just happens. But when I go to like intentionally hook up to what I now feel are my mother and father, the Black Sun and Polaris, something happens, and it happens every time, and it's incredibly recharging. My body gets hot when it happens. I have to take off my sweater every time. It happens very fast. I'm like quite sure it would be measurable, but something definitely happens in me. Like it's this sort of feeling of electricity is very tangible, and the feeling of revitalizing is sort of incredible. It takes a very short time for me to charge up like that, because it's like I said, it's like someone's tickling you. Like even if I try to prolong it, I can't do it for too long. And in the first days after this happened, I had doubts, like how often should I do it? Because I was worried that I would like lose the access. And I wondered, is it better to sort of do it often and sort of keep the gates open? Or should I like stack up some sort of energy that would be like more significant if I was like saving it up for a little while first? And the feeling was so marvelous that I was wondering if I was like being gluttonous about it. Because you can easily get hooked on it, I felt like. So I was pondering this to myself, like, should I sort of feel guilty or not? Or am I doing it too much? Or I guess this is like day 3 or 4 after it happened. And I get this response back inside of me. It says, we're your mother and father. You cannot possibly come too often. You're so welcome. And it was really emotionally moving for me. That was like just what I needed to hear. And the whole first week after the event was super crazy. Like the intense, very intense feeling of well-being didn't it sort of faded up and down a little bit, but it was like it's on 10 or it's on 10 and a half, but it was like nothing I ever felt. Like I don't believe there are really any drugs you could take that would be this intense, because it's fucking intense, and it went on for so long. It was like Monday when it happened, that was the best day of my life. Tuesday, I kind of felt like that was the best day of my life because the feeling was still there and everything is so beautiful. Then Wednesday was the best day of my life. Then Thursday was the best day of my life. Then Friday, the 5th day, that was the most crazy day of my life still. But I had like, at the age of 42, I had like 5 consecutive, by far the best day of my life. And the Friday, at this point, I had, well, Mario doesn't know my career, but I'm actually like somewhat of a legend in the sub niche of battle rap. So I was booked to do a battle in New York. They've been trying to book me for some years, but it's been a problem with the C19 because I'm unjabbed. And the guy who runs the league in New York, he was under the impression that restrictions had been lifted, so he wanted to fly me out. But the whole Novak Djokovic case came up and everything, and it appeared, we found out is they're not really lifted. They're just not practicing that hard. But I didn't want to go through the whole preparations for a battle and then maybe get turned around at the airport. So the battle was postponed. I'm supposed to do it in June now. So anyways, this Friday, which is 5 days after my experience, this is going into the weekend that I was supposed to be in New York, but now I got like the weekend off. Babysitters already booked and everything. So me and the wife got a weekend off. And I felt very much like I was being rewarded by life, and then life was like telling me to, yeah, to reward myself and to sort of enjoy the surplus that I've been given. Like I've been fasting this whole week. It had been so boring and sort of trying. And I had this magnificent experience, and then suddenly I got like a weekend with my wife, and like she's a really beautiful woman. But when you're in this kind of high, it was like she was like so perfect through those eyes, and I felt so blessed having the whole weekend off. And that Friday, I had like, I think a good 4 hours consecutively where I could, I would say, like, no one needs to believe this, but I will say I could tell that I was in a dream. Like I could physically experience that this is a dream. It was very different from regular life. And what's weird about it is that you're sort of detached from it, and that makes it so much more intense. Because the detachment, I think it's that you know you're eternal, and that makes the sort of the moment that much more precious. So I was at this restaurant with my wife, but instead of just being there, I felt like the only way I could explain it was like in a dream. I felt while I was sitting there, it felt like I was at this restaurant with my wife. There were all these people there that were talking, and I'm like taking in all these people that would usually be in the background. And I was there with a woman. She was so beautiful, and she was my wife. I was the luckiest guy on earth, and I had several hours off. I was just enjoying life with my wife. Like people are passing by, and you feel like they're unaware that they're like being dreamt up, but you can tell. And it sounds crazy, but my best explanation for this now, of course, I'm not stupid. I understand it can be just some chemistry in your brain that makes you feel that way. But when you actually experience it, it's so fucking real. Uh, I feel like now that that experience, I can only explain it as I think I connected with the actual dreamer. Like when you're waking up in a lucid dream, it's the person who's being dreamt up is making a connection to the person who's sleeping and who's having the dream, right? I feel like that's what happened. Like I'm somewhat connecting to whoever is actually having the dream, and that makes it so that you can tell that it's a dream. I don't know that, but it was a super crazy experience. This is getting too long winded now, so I'll wrap this up soon. But I do want to run a few things by Mario that are like things I feel like have come to me that relate to this cosmology. Uh, First of all, like I said, after I've been doing this, you know, a few times every day now, and I'm sort of getting familiar with it, I feel like the black sun beneath, what I call the one of the depths, she's my mother, and Polaris is the father. And after sitting on it for a little bit, I kind of also feel like these correspond to Logos and Sophia. Logos above, Sophia below. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. Well, first off, incredible stuff. Thank you for sharing all of that with me. I honestly, I feel honored to be here and just to be on your last show and just for you to go through everything. Wow. I mean, I was taking notes while you were talking because it's reminding me of so much stuff, so many different tangents we can go into. But regarding the Black Sun, you know, the Black Sun has been something that I've been interested in for a little while now, and I have some close friends that are really they kind of base a lot of their workings off of Black Sun cosmological stuff and everything else. So I've read a bit about it. I haven't really talked that much about it on my channel, but to me, it's just a process of completely uncoding and decoding what is going on here with the black sun, because I know that it does play its part in everything. You know, there's a reason why this idea exists and why it's like a really potent sort of concept. And so you might be kind of like speaking to where I'm going to end up with it, because I know exactly what you're talking about with the Freemasonic thing and the black sun being down below and Polaris being above and all of that. So I'm not opposed to that at all. I'm not opposed to Father Polaris, Mother Black Sun, um, that idea. So I'm completely open to it. I think there's still a lot of room for interpretation with all of these things. And obviously, you know, my opinions are subject to change based on incoming information. But if you're going to acknowledge the above, you have to acknowledge the below. And that's something that I've gone into, you know, with multiple friends about like, okay, cool. Well, this is Polaris and you're talking about the North. Well, what's going on below, or what about the South, or what about the underworld, and you know, all of this kind of stuff. So you know, just off of what you're presenting to me, that does resonate, and I can see the case for just all of that.
The
So
vibe that I'm getting now, that I'm sort of, that I feel like I can somewhat subjectively experience it.
mhm.
Uh, to me, what it feels like now is that life is actually taking place inside of a womb.
Oh
Uh,
sure.
I do suspect that death is very akin to birth, but the feeling that I get is that it's not like a human womb that the
Mm.
mother carries. It's a unisex womb. So
Mm.
the what you call the axis mundi is really the umbilical cord, and it connects to
Yes.
my father on top and my mother at the bottom. They
Ah.
both have access to this womb, so it's like a unisex womb.
Mhm.
And it feels like, uh, even though I'm sure they're always connected, it feels like my mother and my father, they don't only love me, but they love each other. And when I do this shit, I allow them to meet and love each other in a more intense way too. That is like a win-win for all parties. Uh,
Mhm.
they can connect more through me than they could without me, which is also why I'm so welcome, I think.
Mm.
Uh, and a couple days after this happened, I was like trying to recreate it. One time, I felt called to call upon the sun and the moon. It's like, it's weird because I feel like I know what to do now when I do these motions and stuff. No one taught them to me, but it definitely feels like it's working. And to me now, it's like I feel like I can sort of pull in the sun through my right hand, the moon through my left hand, and it's like they balance each other out. And uh, this may not be precise vernacular, but it do feel like if the stream between the up and the down is more electrical, then between the sun and the moon is kind of more magnetic. And I do somewhat feel that the one above and the one below, they're like the ultimate principles. But within this system, I do feel like the sun is sort of the generator, and the moon is sort of the destroyer, or helps you let go or kill your darlings, or you know, destroyers is not necessarily negative, but these forces balance each other out. Uh, and it's like a slightly different but very tangible feeling too when I do this. Uh, Not sure where I was going with that. I have
Yeah,
one
no
last
worries.
sort of random thing that I wanted to run by you because it was
Sure, sure.
sparked by something you said, and this may be old news to you and everyone else who's like well read, but it was like news to me at least. I was listening to one of your presentations, this is like 2 or 3 days after the event, I guess. I've been listening a lot less to stuff generally, but I can listen to some Mario and some Dr. Stefan Heller. But my threshold for how much I can take before I have to turn it on and like focus on myself is a lot lower than it used to be. Um, but anyways, I heard you say in one of your recent presentations, it was sort of just in passing, but you mentioned that M is probably the most feminine letter because it holds everything inside. And I just registered. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Didn't think more about it. Then a little bit later, that same day, I was meditating, and it just dawned upon me out of nowhere. Like, once again, I'm not saying that this may be old for everyone else, but I was thinking, yeah, or I wasn't even thinking, I just suddenly knew the most masculine sound. You open your mouth fully up. You can even project your tongue out like an erect penis. That's ah. Ah is the most masculine sound. And then ah ooh, as the hole. You make the hole. Ah, the cock goes through the hole, and now you're in the woman. As the sound of creation. And I'm now absolutely certain. That's why the Tibetans say uh, before I was certain that was just like superstition, like they might as well say Feja Hembu, like it's just whatever sounds and the intention they put into it. But now I realize that the ah is the masculine, the M is the feminine, and the U is the whole that's like the gateway. And it just makes perfect sense.
I like
It's
that. I like that. Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense too. I even think of Dada, dad. There's a reason why there's an A in there, and then mom, right? The feminine M and everything else. So yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense for sure. I like it. I like it. And man, there's so much stuff to unpack, dude, with all the things that you mentioned. I know we've been going a little long here, which is totally cool. But wow, I mean, your stream of consciousness with just getting everything out with your history and kind of leading up to, you know, um this awakening or this Kundalini experience or whatever. There's just I have to mention a couple of things real quick. There's a lot to be said about the Hermit card and how it corresponds with your story, with a lot of the things that you mentioned. And even in some esoteric decks, it's not uncommon to see a sperm cell in the Hermit card. And Hermit, the Hermetic sort of way is like there is an understanding of things, think of like hermetically sealed, the fact that the hermit is oftentimes associated with caves, which is like a symbolic womb sort of thing. And he's on kind of a search for the feminine. The hermit card corresponds with Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury, which gets into a lot of polar symbolism, phallic symbolism, this Kundalini business, and everything else. So, as you were talking about some of this stuff, I'm just reminded of the power, of the hermit card. And so, if you're going down your tarot journey, that might be something that you just might want to spend some time meditating on or researching or whatever. And certain things might come to light, as it relates to this experience and stuff. But yeah, man, there's just, like I said, a lot of other things we could get into, but I just, yeah, you're inspiring me. So that's really cool to come on a show, to be invited on a show, to have a conversation. I feel like I'm walking away with just like gems, and I feel like I'm walking away, thinking about certain things that I want to incorporate and that I want to try. And the fact that you also too were calling upon Polaris and the Black Sun during this experience, that is huge. That is absolutely fascinating. And I appreciate the fact that you had the awareness to do that, and then also that it seemed like it really triggered something, to
Yeah,
get
for
to the
me that
next
was crazy,
level.
and that's kind of why I wanted to have you on, because I feel like had it not been for your work, I would have not had that key at that moment.
Sure. Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly. So just yeah, much respect, dude, much love. Like that's really, really interesting. And it's something that I kind of want to follow up with and do some more research on, and I feel like you're inspiring me to maybe take that sort of practice and some of my other practices a little bit more seriously versus being on autopilot with it, or kind of letting certain things kind of fall by the wayside or
I
whatever. So
definitely feel now that the black sun is connected to the bottom of the root chakra, and
seems like it, that would make sense.
Polaris to at least somewhere in the brain. Like I'm not well versed, but it's at the top somewhere. Like
Totally.
but I still feel like uh, uh, it, it's not to just sit there and like I feel like I should consciously and respectfully invite them. Sort of,
Mm,
uh, I get much more of a response from that. Like I can sit around and breathe forever and nothing's gonna happen. Like uh,
right, right, right.
all right, wow, that was a lot for me.
I
Thank
believe
you
it. I
so
believe it.
much for being part of this, Mario.
Yeah, you got it. Thank you once again for the invite. I really I gained a lot from this. So yeah, much respect, and best of luck too with just everything you have going on in your life moving forward. It sounds as though you're definitely on the right path though. I would
It
say.
feels like it. I can't
Yeah.
lie. It feels like it. Life has not been like it's a couple weeks since now, and it's not been
Hmm.
like blissful in the same way since. Like obviously, my I guess my chemistry is sort of stabilized, so
Hmm.
now I can get like a little whiff here and there of what I call the brain gasm, but it's not at all what it was the first week. But
I believe it.
I feel like the work that was supposed to be done, it's like the construction sort of ended after a week. So if uh, but since then I've had like definite like challenges in my life. It's not been like all blissful,
Sure.
but it's weird how everything that the challenges that have been in my life have all been is problems that were in my life before the experience, but I was completely unaware of them at the time. It's like
Mm,
stuff that has come to light. So I have a feeling of like sort of cleaning up after my old self, or what I should say. But yeah,
yeah. It reminds me of that old saying, before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. There's just there's always work to be done. There's always stuff to do. You're gonna still be part of this tangible, you know, physical reality. You're gonna still need to probably pay your bills and get groceries and run errands and stuff like that. And so it's really interesting to kind of juggle this kind of existence that way. I feel like this is partly what the human condition is about. How do
mm,
you manage being a spiritual being that's connected to everything, and everything has meaning, and there's all these incredible, amazing things that you can take away, from this whole narrative and your narrative. Yet there's all this other stuff that kind of like,
yes.
you need to be disciplined about, and all of that. So there's still, just responsibilities and all that to take care
Yeah, but
of.
I have a, I have less discipline in my life now because
Okay.
I had a lot before, but
Mm,
now after the event, it's like I got a whole new thing that I didn't have before, which is a natural sense of moderation. So it's
mm,
like you can have a little bit of this, you can enjoy that. Whereas I used to have like just the on button or the off button,
I see.
and then you should probably have the off button most of the time. So I've actually
Hmm.
been, and also what you said about how do you balance being a spiritual person is weird because what I've been going through, uh, like how I feel now, or the what I feel like the signals that I'm getting, is not at all like what my prejudice would tell me. Like
Mm,
I do not at all feel like I should go to a Buddhist temple and sit around and meditate all day. Like on the contrary, I feel like for me, definitely the messages I'm getting is you should experience life, you should enjoy life. And I don't feel
hmm.
like I have to seek out spirituality that much more. It will be present in my life through what happens. But for me, like actually experiencing the experience is going to be, will have to be the focus. And also, I was
Yes,
assuming
I love
like
it.
if something like that happens, you have this image of, uh, which is to call them sages or enlightened people or whatever, being kind of immovable, or like extremely stable with their quote unquote detached feelings, which I don't feel like that's what's happened to me. I feel like I have perhaps a more immediate emotional response to stuff than I used to. But
Mm,
this helps me with boundaries. Like I have better boundaries than I used to, and I can like instantly tell, no, no, I'm not cool with that. Whereas before, I was like, I would maybe be too diplomatic, and then I would have to return to it later. Like, I remember what we talked about yesterday. I'm not cool with it after all. Now that I've been pondering,
mm.
that used to happen to me a lot. And like, oh, we got to talk about yesterday. Like, this stuff has been like rubbing me the wrong way after the fact. I feel
Hmm.
like I should have got offended or whatever. So now that doesn't happen. Like, because I'm like much more in tune with my boundaries. I can communicate them effectively, and then shit works out. I get like a little confrontation, and then it works out instead of like a whole lot of lingering and then a bigger one later on. Uh, so it's not like I'm letting everything slide or being like blissful. Like I can
Yeah, exactly.
still get annoyed, but it feels like I'm handling it more constructively.
Seems like it just really brought a lot of clarity on a few different levels,
Yeah,
and so when you are, I think, the conspiratorial sort of thing, just to wrap things up, I guess, but like, it's worth kind of questioning yourself. You can question the outside world. That's great. But you should turn in and you should start questioning yourself, and you should start kind of wanting to understand your inner truth, the truth about who you are, and get to what I kind of refer to as like your true north or your sacred center kind of thing. Because the more you get to that, which you had a direct experience about that, the clearer the outer world becomes. So to me, it's just like if you're all out of sorts, it's like your discernment or your beat on reality is going to be distorted as well, pretty much. But as you kind of tune in or tap in and have some of these revelations and whatever, I just feel like that there's an as above so below sort of correspondence, as within so without. And so then your perception on your reality and your relationships and the circumstances you're going through, they're going to be that much clearer as you gain inner clarity as well. That's how I perceive it.
I,
um
I
but
think
yeah,
also that at least for me, when I look back, I feel like there's the actual knowledge, but there's also how you handle it. I feel
absolutely, yeah.
like I kind of feel like uh, truth is testing you. You get a little bit of truth, you have to sort of prove yourself worthy. Like, depending on what kind of truth or what level of truth or whatever, worthy could be being able to incorporate it into your worldview,
Mm,
or it could be being able to speak it out loud, not being afraid. Uh, there are like different sort of tests. It could be uh, being willing to go through the ridicule, but still standing
mm,
for what you believe in. But they're like, or a big one of them is being willing to teach, not being sort of greedy
mm,
about it. I
mm,
had one moment that I think was kind of important for me, was because when you go through the ridicule, you get a little defensive. You start telling yourself the story that I'm the smart one, they're the stupid ones. I
mm,
understand and they don't, and that's why they ridicule me. And the danger of that is, being the smart one who understands can sort of become your identity.
yeah.
And then when you explain to someone and they understand it, they maybe even do further research a bit later on. They know more about it than you. You hear them explain what you taught them to someone else just as eloquently as you could, then a part of you could become like jealous, like he's doing my spiel as my info. Like, uh,
Mm,
I harbored those feelings once, to someone I had been kind of teaching, and I had to like instantly confront myself real hard, like, fuck, you've been so alone for so long, and now you're gonna like bitch about not being unique. Like,
Hmm.
I had to really like, fuck it, no, I've chosen the side of the truth. I will rejoice when it's being spread.
Yeah.
I sort of overcame that, and I think that was like, for me, looking back, it feels like that was what qualified me to get like sort of the last partner guy who like pushed me over the edge with the crystal oil and everything.
All right, people. Thank you so much for making it this far. This is kind of an unorthodox move, but I'm inserting this segment right here with just like a couple minutes left of the conversation between me and Mario to let you know the following. The event that I was talking about in my life, it occurred on equinox, the 20th of March. The conversation between me and Mario was recorded on Thursday, the 13th of April, so like 3.5 weeks later. I'm putting it out today. This is Saturday, the 22nd of April. So it's like 9 days that had passed since my conversation with Mario. And I feel like I have a lot more clarity now as far as the cosmology, or a lot more detail. So I feel like what I said in the interview, I don't think any of it was wrong, but I feel like it was lacking in detail compared to the picture that I have of it now, to the point where I feel like I have to like make an appendix to do like an update. So for those of you who are interested in my cosmology, there will be another segment to this video after the outro beat. So it'll be like a couple more minutes, just wrapping up the conversation between me and Mario, and the outro beat will play, and I'll add another segment, and that will explain how I view the cosmology now. And I didn't know that when I asked Mario the question, but in my view now, that also relates to the question of going towards the light versus going towards the darkness. So for those of you who are interested, you can check that out. And now back to the talk with Mario.
Yeah, no, I've gone through similar lessons myself, and there's enough truth to go around.
Absolutely,
there's
yeah.
enough gnosis and wisdom and everything else to go around. So you don't really have to worry about that after a while. But it's an important realization to come to. Exactly. I felt like I've gone through that cycle a couple times for sure.
So thank you so much for being a part of this, Mario. I'm truly blessed to have actualized this, actually done this episode with the guy I was like listening to while during the build-up. I'm very grateful. For my listeners, my steady listeners, I will upload one more sort of outro solo episode a week from now on. That's just going to be like thank yous and shout outs and stuff. I'm not going to do the whole story one more time, but it's going to be a little more focused on what I'm going to do next and where you can find me if you want to be part of that. But as for the actual episodes, this is the last one. I'm thinking I'm going to include the original, like the first intro / outro beat for the ending of this episode. So it's going to be like a full circle. With all of that said, thank you so much, Mario, and thank you so much for listening.
Okay, so here we go. Let me preface by saying I certainly don't want to impose this view on anyone. I feel like I sort of, since I opened that door in an interview and I'm now expanding on my view, I sort of should give an update, but I'm definitely not telling anyone to accept it as true. Ultimately, I don't know myself. It feels true to me. That's all I can say. And I feel like I haven't been getting these insights or delusions, depending on how you judge it. But I feel like I haven't been getting it from outside sources, sort of. I haven't been looking for this. And it's been coming to me in the time between the recording of the conversation and the today when I'm putting it out. So, you know, if it resonates with you, you can ponder it, right? The main point of the update, which got me to everything else that'll come later on, but like the most important point is I was talking to Mario about this, what I would call the cosmology of the cross, where you have the axis mundi as the vertical line, and the line between the sun and the moon is the horizontal line. I feel now as though that's incomplete, because I think that there are two more objects below corresponding to the sun and the moon. So what I initially called the black sun, like the mother, as like the lower correspondence to Polaris, right? But there's also like a sun below and a moon below. And if you think of the human body, I told Mario I feel like the axis mundi is from the root chakra to the brain, right? And sun is in the one hand, the moon is in the other. Well, I definitely feel like the two last points below, like what I can only call the sun below and the moon below, they're the feet. This I feel like I can verify from a subjective experience. It was definitely helpful for me as far as the charging up thing that I talked about in the interview. It's more accessible to me now that I feel like I unlocked the last 2 points. So this part of it all, the 6 points, personally, subjectively, I feel quite confident about it. What's going to come after this is more speculative. It's stuff that comes to me, but I cannot experience it in the same way. So I kind of feel less confident about what comes after this, but I still kind of believe in it. But yeah, so you got the 6 points, and I feel like a really good symbolic representation of this is the Star of David. I feel like that's what it ultimately encodes. And I think the Star of David visualizes or symbolizes how it kind of works. You got Polaris on top, sort of beaming down to the sun below and the moon below. And then you got the mother below, beaming up to what we call the sun and the moon. If you look at the point where the two triangles intersect, you could draw a line between them, and that would be the plane upon which we exist. So yeah, I think the Star of David is a real beautiful symbol now in a very good representation of a more complete cosmology. Now, as far as the Masonic logo that we were talking about, that's basically the same symbol as the Star of David, right? They just didn't draw out one of the lines in each triangle, but it's there. It's the same symbol, but it has more detail. Firstly, you have the G in the middle. To me, the G symbolizes a couple different things. Most obviously, I think it symbolizes the fact that there are 7 stations to this Axis Mundi. So from the bottom to the top, there are 7 stations. The G is 7, right? I was maybe under the impression that Mario thinks there are 7 sort of layers between us and the top. That may be wrong, but that was the impression I got. That could be true, but I'm personally thinking now that there are 7 stations in total, and we're in the middle. So we're at the 4th, and the heart chakra is where we are. But I think the G symbolizes the 7 stations. It would work, you know, whether there are 7 layers above us or 7 in total, but I think there's probably 7 in total. But on a deeper level, I think the G also symbolizes the 7th point. There are 6 points to the Star of David, right? But the 7th point, G, perhaps for God, is you. When you consciously place yourself in the middle of the Star of David, you connect all these 6 points, and you become the conscious experiencer of the experience. To me, that's the key. That's by far the most important message. Because in the Star of David, the original Star of David, they haven't pointed out the point in the middle or the Axis Mundi. You sort of have to find it. But in the cross, you can see the Axis Mundi, and in the Masonic logo, you can see the point in the middle. As you, if you were to superimpose them all on each other, I think it would be like the ultimate symbol. Like if you just draw out the Axis Mundi between Polaris and the lower point in the Star of David, it would look like you superimposed a cross on the Star of David. And if you have the point in the middle as well, it could be a G or it could just be a circle. I think that would be sort of the ultimate symbol. You just put them all on top of each other. Now there's more detail in the Masonic logo, because in the Star of David, it's just 2 triangles, right? Symbolizing sort of the race. But in the logo, the rays are, they're not just random triangles. The top part is a compass and the bottom part is a square. Now, if we understand that this is like a 2D representation of a 3D reality, it's natural to assume that the compass is a compass because it alludes to the, not only the dome shape, but the very rotation of the heavens, because of how you use it, right? And the dome rotates, or the stars rotate. Who the fuck knows? But there is rotation connected to this, to the heavens. So I think it implies the circular dome shape and the rotation. But what then about the square? And this is definitely the most far out and speculative part of this all. I have no way to prove it. But I actually think that lets us know that the lower part is a stationary cube. And I feel now like that's the black cube that we've all been told is connected to Saturn. I may be wrong. I don't know a lot about that, but I never heard like a super good reason why the black cube would symbolize Saturn, except for like a connection through the number 6, but I think it's vague. But if the lower part is a cube, the black cube, and it's stationary, initially it feels weird, but there are a few things that would make a lot of sense to me. Like, if you were to take a black cube and put it on your forehead, like some people do, that would mean not only that you're uniting the masculine and the feminine, but also that you're placing the bottom on top, thus becoming like the hanged man. I can see now why that would be like a very powerful sort of a ritual, or what you want to call it. So if the cube is Kaaba and Allah is the Most High, then Kabbalah would be the unity of these polarities. Now, the way I think about it now, I feel like below us is the darkness. The mother is sort of beaming up darkness, if that makes sense, or she is the point through which the darkness what's the English word? Inseminated into the world. So the darkness comes from underneath into our world, and the light comes from above. And the way I think of it now, with the 7-plane, 7-station cosmology, I think that, when you have darkness, you have mystery and potential. And when you have light, you have clarity. And now I think I understand that us being in the middle realm, this is the only place where we have equal parts mystery and clarity, equal parts dark and light. And I think this is what gives us free will. Because imagine if you think of a dark room, as far as you know, the room has never been lit up. You don't know what's in there. It could be there's a pot of gold in there. It could be whatever. So there's like huge potential. There's mystery and there's enormous potential. But at the same time, you can't do much with it. Like whatever's in there, you can't really find it in the dark. If you find it, you can't really make out what it is. Like you can try to feel it out with your hands, but it's not the same as being able to see it. So even though the potential as far as the mystery is huge, your ability to do something with it is very little because of the lack of clarity. This is what I think existence is like in the realms beneath us. There's more potential and more mystery, but there's less room for action because of the lack of clarity. Now, if you imagine, like, say you're being water. If you're water, what are you going to do? you're gonna like flow. You're gonna vaporize and you're gonna flow. It's probably a cool experience, and obviously you can impact your surroundings a whole lot over time, and you can like probably like soak up a lot of vibes, learn a lot of shit, but it's like a slow grind, and you're not like very much in control of it, sort of. You experience it, but it kind of happens to you. Like you can't flow uphill. You can't like say if you're like iron, what the fuck are you gonna do? You're like gonna wait for someone to pick you up and do something which you like, right? And you know, I can only imagine what's beneath. Like, I don't know, but I imagine it's more kind of very passive and slow, with very much potential, but very little realistic room of actualizing this potential. But then above us, you have more light. Like you can just, you know, you can see it. Like there's more darkness beneath us, and there's more light above. Now with light comes clarity, right? You turn on the light in the room, you can see what's there. And then you can decide what to do with it. You can take action in the best way. But you also know what's not there. Like, you know, it's probably not a pot of gold when you turn on the light. You know it's not a pot of gold. Like, now that potential is gone, right? And I think it's, if you go up from where we are, you get more light, and you get more clarity. And with clarity comes a knowing of what's right. And so the internal debating stops. And if you don't have, like, if you just know what's right, there's not really decision making involved like that. Like you're not going to do what's like the second best option if you know what's right all the time. So with a lot of clarity, the choice element kind of disappears. I think this is why they say angels don't have free will. They just know what to do. So I would imagine that angels don't disagree with each other much. Like it's a different kind of existence, but the more light you have, the less choice you have, kind of. Because, you know, the cards are all on the table, and it's obvious what to do. But we're in the middle with equal parts illumination and mystery. We have to make choices all the time. I can only imagine that from the other realms, this one must appear very exciting. Even though it's challenging. So, as far as what me and Mario were talking about with going towards the light or going towards the darkness, I now believe that there is no right or wrong. It just depends on where you want to go. It's like at the bottom is the ultimate mystery with the mother, which is the most primordial sort of existence. And at the top is the ultimate clarity with the father, which is the most refined sort of existence. And I do believe that when you go to the Father, and the Heavenly Father explains everything to you so that you can understand, and you get ultimate clarity, ultimate illumination, I think that also leads to ultimate unity. And then you're back to the oneness with the mother. Like, so it's ultimately like a loop. And then, you know, probably happens again in a different way. But I also wanted to share a few thoughts on the statement "as above, so below" and polarity. For me, I was always like a little bit weirded out, especially back in the day when people just said "as above, so below" and sort of used it as a proof of their theory. But no one ever tells you, like, why does it have to be as above, so below? Like, are there no exceptions to this? I felt like it was kind of being imposed on me as a law, but I didn't really understand why would it have to be a law? Why can't things be one way to the left and another way to the right? Like, now I feel like I understand it is as above, so below. It's not an ultimate truth, but it's true for this realm because we're in the middle. To me, we're at the 4th out of 7, but it could be the 2nd out of 3. Like, but you would have to be in the middle. If you're at like the 5th out of 6 levels, then it's not as above, so below. You have a lot beneath you and not much above you. That's, obviously, as above, so below lets you know that you're in the middle. And if you're in the middle and the system is like balanced out, then it will be as above, so below. When you figure this out, I think it's a great present that applies in this realm only. And, this being a realm of such great mystery, it's helpful to know that if you can figure out half the picture, you can probably make out the other half. And I think this also explains the concept of polarity. Because we're at the middle, so there are equal parts, light and dark, they will have to balance each other out. So that's the, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right? And, I haven't been talking about this in talks with Mario because it's not relevant and I'm not going to expand a lot on it here, but the lessons that I've been getting seemingly from out of nowhere these last few weeks, they're not mostly about cosmology. That's just what I discussed with Mario. They're mostly about human interaction, what motivates people and what keeps people stuck, etc. And the insights on polarity have been amazingly helpful. I have had like several experiences in a short span of time where I feel like I've been able to see how if someone feels kind of stuck in a position or they can't get to where they want, then oftentimes they'll be blocking themselves or feel like there's something or someone blocking them from going in the opposite direction. Yeah, but enough on that. One last thing I should clarify, just to make it very clear, even though I kind of said it in my Star of David breakdown, but because I said initially that I don't think anything I said in the first talk with Mario was wrong. It was just incomplete. But there is one detail that I think was wrong. As when I said the points of intersection between the square and compass and the Masonic logo were the sun and the moon. What we know is the sun and the moon, they're the ending points of the square. The points of intersection mark the plane on which we exist. Just to be clear on that. I think that was most of the points that I wanted to make. Thank you so much for making it this far. Hope it resonates with some of you if it's true, and that you will call bullshit if it's not. But I personally do think there's something to this. Regardless, wishing everyone a blessed weekend. Thank you so much for listening. Peace. you.